Andrew Pearce here in Downing Street. We are waiting the arrival of Andy Burnham as our 59th Prime Minister, the 7th Prime Minister since in the last 10 years. Extraordinary period. And with Christopher Hope, who is our political editor, extraordinary times, Christopher.
Well, it really is.
And I'm Tom Harwood here live in Westminster as Andy Burnham prepares to pluck his cabinet from the building behind me.
And yes, good afternoon, Britain. It is now midday and I'm Emily Carver, holding down the fort in our Paddington studio. The next 3 hours are going to be absolutely massive for our country. Sir Keir Starmer has just delivered his final speech.
My work is done. In 6.5 years, I took our party from a historic defeat in 2019, changed it so it was fit to face the country, and won a landslide general election victory in 2024.
Yes, he's been to see the King. There he is to offer his formal resignation, while Andy Burnham has been asked to form a government.
I'm in Downing Street with Christopher Hope, our political editor. We await the arrival of our 59th Prime Minister, Andy Burnham, who's on his way to see the King. As soon as he's kissed his hand, he'll be here delivering his first speech as Prime Minister. We'll be there for you.
And then it's the turn of the cabinet. Who's up, who's down, who's in and who's out? Will there be a job for Ed Miliband? How about Shabana Mahmood? We'll have all the details.
Well, yes, in the next 3 hours, we're going to have yet another Prime Minister and a fresh new cabinet. Hold on to your hats. Well, yes, it's already been a big morning, hasn't it? Keir Starmer has gone to Buckingham Palace. He has formally resigned. He's bid farewell to the nation. He said how important his record has been for the Labour Party and for the country, again saying he's left this country in a better place than when he started. We have GBNews presenter Andrew Pearce on the ground in Downing Street. We have my co-host and deputy political editor Tom Harwood on College Green throughout the next 3 hours. We are due to very soon hear from Andy Burnham himself. And in the studio as well, we have the former Attorney General, Sir Michael Ellis, and we'll also have a Labour councillor for Tower Hamlets, Amina Ali. Right, Andrew Pearce, you've been in Downing Street all morning. What can we expect in the next, well, 3 hours?
Well, you can expect in the next 15 minutes the arrival of the Manchester Messiah, Andy Burnham. Really important to be making his speech in number 10. We've got Christopher Hope here. He's already got some breaking news about resignations from the government.
OK, so there's been 2 resignations from the Keir Starmer government in the past few moments, of course, because Andy Burnham has not yet made Prime Minister. The first to go has been Lord Timpson. He, of course, was a Justice Minister, was keen to rehabilitate prisoners. Of course, he runs those Timpson shops, which does employ a lot of former prisoners. And
that's quite a surprise he's gone.
Yes, he was definitely an appointment, I think, driven by Sue Gray, actually, and she got him in under Keir Starmer.
Who Starmer sacked after a few months.
That's right, appointed on the first day of the Starmer government. Also going in the past few seconds, Lord Vallance, that's Patrick Vallance, who many viewers and listeners will remember as one of the public faces of the COVID pandemic. He says he's leaving for personal reasons. After a decade of government, I'm stepping down, he says. A privilege to serve. He wishes Andy Burnham and the new team number 10 all the best, and I will continue to advise and help them in a non-ministerial capacity. So just to remind you, 2018-2023, Lord
Christopher, we are just seeing live footage of Andy Burnham entering the gates of Buckingham Palace, where he will speak to the King and ask him to form a government. Christopher.
Yes, well, this shows that the drama that's happening here. So as Andy Burnham goes in to meet the King and becomes the Prime Minister, various ministers who are currently in post are leaving office. So I can just remind you there that Lord Vallance, Patrick Vallance, he has quit as a Science Minister. And we've also seen Lord Timpson has quit also. And then we see Andy Burnham being greeted.
Sorry to interrupt again. We're just seeing Andy Burnham come out of his Prime Ministerial car and enter Buckingham Palace. There he is, alongside his wife, I believe, Sir Michael.
Yes, and Sir Clive Alderton there, the King's private.
That's the name.
20 years, just greeted him together with one of the King's equerries in waiting, taking him now to see His Majesty. His Majesty the King will ask Mr. Burnham whether he is able to command the confidence of the House of Commons and form a government.
OK, and back to you, Christopher.
Here. That's right, yes. So we saw there Andy Burnham going into Buckingham Palace with Marie Van Heel, his wife.
And he was with Sir Clive Alderton, who is the King's private secretary and been with the King a very, very long time, the most senior official in the whole of the monarchy. So he'll be taking the new Prime Minister to be up to see the King.
And quite what the King makes of this. There's lots of chat. Of course, the current government announced a huge plan of bills, acts, of laws to be passed, 40 of them in May.
Yeah.
I can't imagine many of them will last under Andy Burnham. He'll be back in the Parliament doing another King's speech.
And I know when that will be. It'll be probably sometime in October, probably, I suppose. And then he has to get in that rickety old carriage. It's a very uncomfortable carriage. And that's the King, at the age of 78, doing a second King's speech. And there was some talk at the time that he didn't want to do that last one. And Nummerton actually confirmed they had said to the palace, we want you to do this King's speech. Because the King could see that Keir Starmer's government was very, very wobbly. And now it's now gone.
It does seem chaotic. 4 prime ministers since he became the monarch following the death of the late Queen Elizabeth in 2022. Quite extraordinary. Here we are again for him. Now here in Downing Street, things are happening. There's a whole team of Andy Burnham staff just beyond the security booth. We can't see them on camera, waiting to go in. They'll process in after Andy Burnham arrives.
It's that old maxim, isn't it? The King is dead, long live the King. The new regime is already moving in, and a lot of the old regime, Starmer's team, are probably still clearing their desks.
That's right. I mean, the King is dead.
Politics is brutal.
It is. The King is dead. Long live the King of the North.
Yes.
I mean, really, but from Downing Street to Coronation Street, these are people who have been brought up, that many of them might be to his team around him in Greater Manchester when he's Manchester Mayor. They are now going to arrive here. They've got to stick to the discipline of that manifesto, which none of them have signed up to.
No, exactly. And then, of course, he does what he does inside. He has to sign up all these nuclear plans when he goes into number 10 first time. Then he's going to start sacking cabinet ministers. He'll do it on the phone if he can, or he'll call them into his cabinet office. We saw some of them outside number 10 this morning. I think Steve Reed will go, don't you, the housing secretary. Liz Kendall, I didn't see her this morning. I didn't see Peter Kyle either, the business secretary, because they are both tipped for the chop.
Yes, and Lord Hermit too, although he says...
Well, he was very bullish when he spoke to you.
Well, he says on his Chagos deal. It's good to ask him about that for the first time for GBNews since covering it so much. I can tell you that Sir Keir Starmer followed protocol. He left the palace privately with his family after quitting as Prime Minister. That happened at 11:24 and left 30 minutes late. So about 11:54, our Prime Minister Keir Starmer left, and then you're seeing there on screen there the arrival there of Andy Burnham with his wife Anne-Marie France, of course, and that is how it works. There's a short period of 6 minutes
when there's no Prime Minister. There's no and it is extraordinary that this King is already on his 4th Prime Minister. The late Queen, in 70 years, had 14 Prime Ministers.
Yes.
That is a measure of the instability now which has gripped our political system.
And it's an instability which Burnham acknowledged, didn't he?
Yeah, and he's going to acknowledge in his speech.
He will. He'll try to say, right, that's it, no more people, no more change of Prime Minister, which there won't be, I think, until the general election. But this is a massive gamble by Labour. Yeah. Everything on red, of course.
Yes.
They are trying to say, this is the guy who can save this government from not returning for a second term.
Yeah, but what he wanted to do is save this country. And what is he going to do? He's already dropped a large hint about raising taxes, a large hint that there will be some form of drilling in the North Sea. Very good. Is he going to get to grips with welfare spending, Christopher? I doubt it.
Yes, well, one can hope so. I think that you might expect Pat McFadden staying on in that role again. We'll speculate all afternoon about who's in, who's out. But it does seem that Andy Burnham, he wants to listen to people. He's someone who feels he can connect with people. He is, in a sense, a people's Prime Minister, without being too Blairite about it. But he really thinks he is.
And from 4 o'clock, we're going to get the cabinet appointments, and I think there will be 1 or 2 surprises.
Yes. I'm looking at people like Rachel Reeves. What will she get? If she won't move from Chancellor, she could bring the whole House of Cards crashing down.
Yeah.
But if she agrees to go to someone like Defence, I've heard she might.
Well, I thought she looked very jumpy and very nervy when she was here for his speech. She positioned herself right next to him. He singled her out to embrace her and kiss her, because I think he knows she's finished as Chancellor. I think if she was judged on her merits, she'd be out, Christopher. She'd be on the backbenches.
Well, I think she has. I think she seems to have found the job a bit overwhelming for her. I think she hasn't really gripped it.
She was crying in the chamber again last week.
Well, and and she's made choices, I think, which other chancellors may not have made, certainly on the issue of old people and heating bills. That was something avoided by previous
winter fuel allowance
Conservatives.
was probably the biggest mistake Starmer's government made, and they've never recovered from it.
Now, Emily, I think you've got some extra intelligence.
No, I was just wondering what your opinion was, really, Andrew and Christopher. The politicians who were stood behind Keir Starmer at that farewell speech, is that an indicator that those are the politicians that will not have a job in government going forward? So I'm thinking Rachel Reeves, I'm thinking David Lammy, also Lord Khan, who some people were thinking that perhaps he might get a job after his peerage.
Well, I don't think Lord Khan wants a job. I think he's very happy to be mayor, and he hasn't made his mind up yet whether he's going to run for a 4th time. Don't we think 3's enough? Blimey! But you can run unlimited times. So I think Lord Khan is quite close to Andy Burnham. He's got people in Burnham's office who are very close to Lord Khan. But I would be surprised if David Lammy disappeared from the government altogether, Emily. He won't carry on as Deputy Prime Minister. That is going to be Lucy Powell, I would say, wouldn't you? The Deputy Leader of the Labour Party.
Yes,
I would say
DPM, but I'm not sure what job she gets. It could be education, which is going spare.
Yeah, but I would think he will keep David Lammy. Not least, he will want to be very aware of the gender balance, ethnic balance.
Yes, that is right. I interviewed Lord Khan, Sadiq Khan, on the channel on Friday.
Did you? That's quite an achievement to get him on.
Well, yes, we do our best at GBNews.
He's never come on my programme.
I did say to him,
he doesn't like me.
I did say to him, Andrew, would you want a job in Keir Starmer's government? He says no. He's in Parliament so he can connect with people making the big choices about London. So as things stand, he's saying he doesn't want a role in government, but he has got key figures from the Simon City office on now around Andy Burnham. I think you saw him front and centre there that group of people. But look at the other ones who wasn't there. People who want preferment in the Andy Burnham government weren't there. People who maybe have plotted for the bring him down. I didn't see Ed Miliband there. I didn't see Lisa Nandy there.
No, and I didn't see Lou Reed there, who's one of the women who ran his campaign.
Lou Hague.
She's the one who, Lou Reed was a singer, forgive me, David Bowie era, showing my age. But Lou Hague was the one who was sacked from the government over an historic issue to do with a phone.
Yes, it was a conviction that I think she had told the Prime Minister about Sir Keir Starmer, but it wasn't more widely known. And when it became revealed by the Times newspaper, she resigned.
Yeah, well, she was forced out by Morgan McSweeney, the Chief of Staff.
There is an issue here, also about Angela Rayner. Now, she was judged to have failed the test of the ministerial standard, but by Laurie Magnus, who was the PM's ethics czar, last September. That is basically 9 months ago. Why is she allowed back into government now? I don't get that. Also, Louise Haigh, she was also found wanting.
She was.
Are we meant to forget these things?
We've got to be forgiving, apparently. But I think Angela Rayner will be back as something like Secretary of State for Health.
Yes, well, the word is she's quite keen for her old job back. Housing, local government, but that might go to a super ministry, a devolved administrations one, led by Lisa Nandy.
You know who else we didn't see? We didn't see Bridget Phillipson, the Education Secretary, and there's a lot of speculation that Bridget Phillipson will go too, because she was seen as very much a Starmer. I'm not saying she's going to out the cabinet altogether, but maybe to a different job.
I think history will judge her more kindly. The reforms she's done on SEND provision are really important to families with children who need that.
Of course.
The disabled children need support, needs help, and it didn't kick off in a major row like I expected. So I wonder, although the divisive thing she's done, which the right don't like, is on private schools.
VAT on private schools, and some would say she did it with relish, and also it kicked in the second term of it kicked in the January. Labour got in the July, so kids were being kicked out of school halfway through the school year, which I thought was really mean.
Absolutely,
they could have waited a year.
And we're still looking at your image there on screen of the two buildings that matter in London today. One of them is Buckingham Palace, where right now in the Chinese dining room, Andy Burnham is meeting with the King, and then of course number 10 Downing Street too.
Yes, Christopher, as we're looking at Buckingham Palace here from the studio, what is going on inside that building? It's all very secretive, but sometimes we do hear from incoming prime ministers, don't we, as to what actually goes on in that building when they're asked to form a government.
That's right. Well, as I understand it, they're meeting in the Chinese dining room where the traditional audience is held between the Prime Minister and the monarch every Tuesday evening. It was once known as the Queen Victoria Dining and Lunchroom. It's adorned with fittings and fixtures from George IV's Brighton Pavilion, would you believe it, which Victoria sold to Brighton Town Council in 1846. And she salvaged most of the artefacts from there and put them into that room. That is the room which, if you've seen films like The Queen, and this weekly audience is a very, very important moment for the Prime Ministers, and we've met them in the past. That relationship with the monarch is really the only one they can trust, apart from their families at home.
It never leaks, except David Cameron got into a lot of trouble once when he revealed that when he told the Queen about the Scottish referendum result, i.e. the Scottish people voted to keep within the Union, he said she positively purred down the telephone. She was not amused.
To be fair to David Cameron, that was a hot mic issue. He went to the UN General Assembly and was overheard saying it to a world leader. But that showed he shouldn't gossip about that.
You don't gossip about conversations with the monarch because they are meant to be watertight and sacrosanct. And you think the stuff she could have told us about her prime ministers, we could have written 10 books.
Well, absolutely. Andrew, just on the speech we're all waiting for, Andrew, this speech from Andy Burnham, just how important is this? I was doing a little research, and usually prime ministers only speak for about 5 minutes, sort of maximum 10 minutes. Now, Andy Burnham, considering he's had little to no scrutiny, he hasn't been contested at all, there's been no leadership hustings or anything else, do you think he might give us a little bit more time?
Well, I hope he does, because the Parliament isn't sitting. The House of Lords is sitting, but not the House of Commons, so he can't be scrutinised there until the middle of September. And, Emily, there's no doubt we have never had a Prime Minister rise to the top job so quickly without any scrutiny at all. Very little scrutiny. He subjected himself to a gruelling interview with Gary Lineker. I don't think that would have been
and
very
he gave an interview overnight to the Times newspaper. And there was one line in the Times interview today which floored me. It was deeply moving. Andy Burnham's father, Roy, has got dementia. He was with him last week. Andy Burnham's father, Roy, doesn't know that his son is being made Prime Minister today. Because he has dementia, his condition means he won't know what's happening to his son. That is, if anyone's got a parent who's elderly, that is deeply, profoundly moving.
And I also think it's why he will make social care a very important part of his premiership, because successive Prime Ministers have manifestly, woefully failed on it. There was nearly a deal when Cameron was Prime Minister. He had an all-party agreement with Ed Miliband, Labour leader, Nick Clegg, Lib Dem leader, but the Tories pulled out.
Yes, and sold that way, I can imagine Angela Rayner might accept it. Just look at the quote there Andy Burnham said about his father. He said, "This, me being Prime Minister, is a family achievement, although he doesn't know. We've done something together." I mean, that is, anyone has a parent.
So even if his dad's watching this on TV now in his care home, he won't know what's going on. It's very moving. My father had Alzheimer's, and it's a terrible, terrible illness to live with, and it puts a huge strain on my mother. But I mean, how sad for Andy that his dad doesn't know. When you think Keir Starmer was always talking about his dad, did he tell us he was a toolmaker? Oh yes, so he did.
OK, we're just looking at a picture of Andy Burnham with the King. That's inside Buckingham Palace. Yes, Andy Burnham has met with King Charles to ask if he can form a government. So there you go. So Michael Ellis is in the room with me. How important is this moment?
Yes, Emily, so Andy Burnham is having an audience now with His Majesty the King, which is the phraseology that we use, and the King will be asking Andy Burnham if he feels that he can command the confidence of a majority of the House of Commons, which clearly Andy Burnham can do at the moment, and at that point the King will invite him to form a government in his name. As you were saying earlier, this is the King's 4th Prime Minister now in less than 4 years as sovereign. The late Queen had 15 Prime Ministers during 70 years as sovereign. Even Queen Victoria, who had 63 years on the throne, only had 10 Prime Ministers. So the King is already catching up with that. But Andy Burnham will have a few minutes now of a conversation then with the King, no doubt the King talking to him about what his plans are. We don't know. These things are kept absolutely confidential, and even ex-Prime Ministers and former Prime Ministers have been very discreet about these meetings. We do know, though, an interesting anecdote, Emily, is it's discussed as kissing hands. The actual physical kissing of a hand, the sovereign's hand, hasn't taken place since, we think, 1908.
OK.
And King Edward VII had his hand kissed by H.H. Asquith in 1908. There's a story in 1905 when Sir Henry Campbell Bannerman was becoming Prime Minister and tried to kiss King Edward VII's hand, and the King pulled his hand away. The would-be Prime Minister approached for a second time to try again, and the King again pulled back. Clearly didn't want his hand kissed, and then the King summarily apparently brought the meeting to a close. So I don't know whether it was the moustache, but that was something that happened way back in 1905. But we still call this meeting the kissing of hands.
But it's fantastic to see that Andy Burnham has chosen to wear a suit and tie as well. So, Michael, thank you very much. We are going to go to Tom Harwood now, who is on College Green. So this is the 4th Prime Minister of King Charles III's reign already. Keir Starmer, Rishi Sunak, Liz Truss, Andy Burnham, now the 7th Prime Minister in just over 10 years. No leadership contest, no general election. Tom.
Absolutely. What a moment in our politics. I've only been a journalist in this world for the last 8 years, and yet it seems like I've rattled through more prime ministers than a journalist should do in their lifetime. Anyway, let's speak now to a Labour MP, one of the people that Andy Burnham will have to keep on side if he wants to keep the show on the road over the next 3 years. Alex Davies-Jones is a Labour MP, a former Home Office Minister. Thanks indeed for joining us here. What do you expect will be different now that Andy Burnham is officially Prime Minister?
Hope. I'm really, really positive about the future, the imminent sort of listening that Andy has been doing to Labour MPs and the country about what's needed to change, what the priorities should be for them, tackling the cost of living crisis, focusing on domestic issues, really getting to grips with all of the United Kingdom, getting out of the Westminster bubble a bit, really excited by the prospect of number 10 North. So yeah, all of these things I'm really, really looking forward to happening soon.
Interesting that you pick up on this idea of focusing on domestic issues. Is that an implicit criticism of the last Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, and his 50 foreign trips over the course of his premiership?
Well, look, there was a lot going on in terms of the world stage, and I think Keir Starmer as Prime Minister also had to do a lot of resetting with relationships around the world, given the chaos of the Conservative governments we had and the numerous Conservative Prime Ministers. So there was a lot of resetting that needed to be done. But I think given we have got war in Europe and Ukraine, conflict in the Middle East, a president in the United States that needs to be kept potentially on side for trade and relationship building, then of course those things are important, and they do have an impact on domestic issues here at home, particularly on energy prices, for example. So all of this needs to be carefully managed and carefully balanced, but ultimately I'm really, really looking forward to Andy getting to grips with the issues that matter here at home to us, to communities like the one I represent.
Now, there is an implicit issue with regard to Andy Burnham's popularity. The Economist has a new poll out today. I don't know if you've seen it, a heat map across the country where Andy Burnham is popular. And he has North Korean levels of popularity in Greater Manchester, in the wider north of the country. But that's only a quarter of the population of the country. And the further south you go, the lower his popularity gets.
Well, I'm not surprised by that, given that Andy was Mayor of Greater Manchester, and that's where he's known. That's where I would expect his popularity to be the strongest. Now I'm really keen, now he's Prime Minister for all of the United Kingdom, for everyone else to get to know him, for everyone else to get to know the Andy that the people in Greater Manchester know, and they can get to grips with him, they can judge him on his policies that he's going to be implementing, on his new cabinet announced today. So yeah, really keen for that to happen.
Now, of course, that new cabinet is what everyone's going to be looking forward to after the new Prime Minister's first speech. You were a minister in the Home Office. Would you expect to be getting back on that ministerial rungs, the rungs of that ministerial ladder?
My first job, first and foremost, is to be the Member of Parliament for Pontypridd. That is the job I was elected to do, and the one that I am most proud to do, and I represent them as the best of my abilities. If I am asked to serve, it is always an honour and a privilege. I'm a public servant, it's what we do. But I'm not expecting my phone to ring anytime soon, Tom.
Well, we might have to get you back on later in the week and see if it has rung, perhaps on day 2 or 3. Now, ultimately, Andy Burnham is going to be trying to build a cabinet that will represent all sides of the party. That's something he's said. But there is a wide expectation that there may be a shift to the left on fiscal issues, perhaps more spending, more tax. Is that something you expect?
Well, no, I expect Andy to stick to the manifesto that we stood on in 2024. He's already given that commitment and that priority, and that is what I would expect. So for your viewers, I wouldn't expect too much of a dramatic shift. I'm hoping that we we are able to do some different pulling of levers, actually making some decisions, which was difficult under Keir Starmer and within his government, and really driving forward. Enough strategies, enough consultations, let's get out there and deliver.
A lot of people might feel a bit confused between, is this a continuity of the 2024 manifesto, or is this a step change, a new dawn full of hope? I mean, these are two different arguments that seem quite hard to square.
I think it can be both. We stood on that manifesto in 2024. That is what was elected by the British public. That was the mandate they give us to govern for them. And there was so much in that manifesto that I'm immensely proud of, and I'm keen to actually get on with delivering. But with Andy now in charge, with that renewed vigour, the vibes that everybody's talking about, which do matter, that hope, I think we can push that forward and get on with the job.
Potentially a vibe shift Prime Minister. Well, Alex Davies-Jones, thanks indeed for joining us here live on College Green, outside a prorogued, or a recessed Parliament, I should say. But my goodness me, what a lot of action today. Back to you, Emily.
Yes, Tom, I just wonder, a quick question. Has there been any recent Prime Minister who hasn't said that what they're changing is hope, had the mantra of hope? But it's not like any Prime Minister is going to call for more despair, is it?
Well, it's interesting you say that, because ultimately the slogan of the Labour Party in the 2024 general election was change. Now, a lot of people were comparing that at the time to the Obama 2008 presidential slogan, hope and change. And there was a slightly sly joke at the expense of Keir Starmer at the time in 2024 that he was offering change without the hope. Perhaps the implicit message of Andy Burnham using that word hope over and over again, hope in every heart, that slogan that we keep on hearing, that I'm sure we will hear from Downing Street in just a few minutes' time. Is he trying to inject that vibe shift that we never saw from Starmer? Perhaps the same text,
Tom, sorry to interrupt. We're just hearing that there is some breaking news coming from Downing Street, so we're going to hop over to Christopher Hope very shortly. Christopher, we're hearing some news from Downing Street. We're going to pop over to there very shortly. So Michael, who's in the studio with me too, we are about to welcome Andy Burnham as our Prime Minister, and as is normal, as is the usual course of affairs, we're greeted with a speech outside Downing Street.
Yes, and of course he's apparently let it be known that he's not going to use a lectern. This is one of these sort of signals that he's sending about his modernity, I suppose. It hasn't actually been a tradition for very long that there be a lectern at that point. People will be listening carefully to what he has to say, but I don't think he's going to say much at this early stage. He hasn't said very much at all on policy. He's very untested in terms of his political mandate is vanishingly small, because he hasn't gone through the hustings, the leadership contest that, for example, various Tory leaders did when they became Prime Minister in mid-term. So he remains really quite an enigma when it comes to what he's actually going to do. He's said very little. He hasn't subjected himself to parliamentary scrutiny because it's been timed so as to avoid Parliament until September now. He hasn't subjected himself to robust journalistic scrutiny because he's avoided the tough interviews. And when he's given any remarks at all, they've been to friendly audiences of people that are familiar with him and friendly to him. So people are going to be listening very carefully to what he has to say.
I think they will, but I also think a large portion of the public will be ignoring what is going on, seeing just the revolving door of number 10, seeing a man sort of manufacture a by-election and then become Prime Minister in a few weeks. I mean, it is quite extraordinary, or at least should be. We are going to go now head back to Downing Street because Christopher Hope is there with Andrew Pearce. Christopher, what can you tell us?
Yeah. Well, I can confirm there's no lectern. Now, I've covered a number of these handovers, as Andrew Pearce, longer than I have. There's no lectern required for Andy Burnham to speak in front of. There are two microphones set up now in front of the door, the famous black door of 10 Downing Street. He'll stand there and make his address. You saw there on the footage there from the still photographs we have of the King meeting with the Prime Minister, new Prime Minister Andy Burnham. He was wearing a suit. There's speculation he wasn't going to wear a suit, but he did for the King, and I
think he had to. And already, Team Burnham is in now number 10. There's literally,
there they are, because
and some of them are some of the part of the old team, but there's a lot of new faces there.
Well, just looking around, I can see no MPs there. They are all team around Andy Burnham. Some of them are some people at the back who I spotted who were there previously under Sir Keir Starmer. So they've hung around.
I suspect a lot of the ministers are in their offices, sitting by their telephones, waiting for the call. out or in,
they'll be telling,
up or down.
They'll be telling their wife and family or the husband, don't phone me for 4 hours.
Yes.
I can't be engaged. I might miss out on a job in government.
And the call doesn't come from the Prime Minister's phone, it comes from the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff. So the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff's phone is going to be red hot from 2 o'clock till 5 o'clock, because there's a lot of appointments a lot of people to fire. They get fired first, and then the appointments.
It's always fun to phone people from an unknown number about now. If they're waiting for a phone call from the PM, they won't thank you for it.
No.
But there's a whole team around him. I'm looking there. I can see new faces there. Some figures I don't recognise. There might be some people there from his time in Greater Manchester. But it really is. It feels like a new government to me, Andrew.
Yeah, and there's a very interesting face there. There's a woman there called Alison Phillips, who Christopher and I know from the world of newspapers. She was the editor of Daily Mirror for a long time. She left the newspaper chain, and she's now in Number 10 as Director of Transition, a really important role.
And just finally, I can see Josh Simons is there with his son. Now, Josh Simons is important, Emily and Tom, because, of course, he resigned as MP for Makerfield, and that allowed Andy Burnham in. So Josh Simons has said he doesn't want to be part of this new government. He's got other plans, but he's involved, frankly, because, of course, he gave his seat to Andy Burnham. Emily, what do you make of all this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're talking about how there's not going to be a lectern. What can we expect from Andy Burnham in terms of how is he going to use his body? Is he going to be strutting down? Is he going to be standing there with his arms freely? Is he going to be using notes at all? Is he going to be speaking from the heart?
Yes,
what do you imagine things will look like?
Well, I don't think, or there may be an autocue set up for him. I can't quite see one, because as you say, Emily, without having a lectern to speak from, he might be sort of holding notes in shaking hands. But there is, that looks to me like there is actually, or that could be a BBC autocue being used. But yes, we'll wait and see. You might expect it's the kind of speech which Andy Burnham would deliver from the heart. He wouldn't need to read many notes. But this
plenty
will
of time
count.
to prepare it. Plenty of time to prepare it. And he's going to talk about the biggest shake-up in the way government is done in 40 years. He's talking about Thatcher, really, isn't he? The way she shook government up completely. He didn't approve of the way she did it. And also he's going to be talking about the instability that's been triggered by the fact he is the 6th or 7th Prime Minister in the last 10 years.
Yes.
Which is not good for government. And it's not good for the country.
It's also being aware of we may see other family members of Andy Burnham with him, of course. His wife should be there, Anne-Marie France, but also we could see his 2 teenage boys, maybe in their early 20s. I did meet his wife up in Makerfield and helped her reverse a car when she couldn't get out of quite a tight turning out of Ashton Town Football Club. These people, they weren't expecting this. They were having lived their life in Greater Manchester. They will now find a lot more scrutiny on them. We don't know where he's going to live.
No.
Will he live in the bigger flat above 11 Downing Street or 10 Downing Street, or maybe he won't move in at all?
I think the idea will be that he spends most of the time in the north. He's going to create a number 10 of the north, and I think his family to carry on living in the north. That's his plan. But you know, but as you know, the focus of government is here in Whitehall. But he's determined to devolve more and more power out to the regions, out to the elected mayors, who will have tax-raising powers as well.
There on screen there, Josh Simons with his newborn son, of course. Other Labour figures are embracing. I think that maybe the press secretary, who I know, being embraced by another Labour colleague. Steve Rotherham is here. Now, he is the mayor of Liverpool City region. He wrote a book with Andy Burnham about their plans for government. I can't quite see him there, but this is a northern takeover, you could say, of Downing Street. This is a Coronation Street in Downing Street. These are people who have forged their political muscle, their political ideas in the north of England. They're back here taking over the centre of power, Andrew.
I have to think,
Chris,
when did we last have a northern Prime Minister in number 10? You probably have to go back to Harold Wilson. You probably have to go back to Harold Wilson in the 70s.
Christopher, I was just wondering on that point, is this a problem? Andy Burnham may well be popular up in the northwest. He may well have his supporters. He's talking about how important the north is, bridging that north-south divide. But there is polling out today, is there not, that shows that a lot of people who do not live in the northwest are very, very sceptical indeed.
Well, that's right. I think there's concern that he doesn't govern for the whole country. That's why we'll see him travel around the UK, I would expect, in the next few days. Scotland first, maybe that oil and gas announcement in Scotland, and then other countries too. On screen now, you saw there Steve Rotherham clutching a newborn baby, looks like.
Yeah.
Probably, I expect, a grandson or granddaughter rather than one of his own
He'll go
children.
to Wales, he'll go to Northern Ireland.
Yes, he's got to. He simply has to.
He's got to go all over the country. And of course, the north has areas of poverty, but you go to parts of Cornwall, Devon and Cornwall, huge areas of what people would call a poverty and deprivation.
Exactly. There's obviously people going to go on holiday there. They don't see what it's like to live there all year round. There's real poverty away from the coastline in Cornwall, for example. That's why
a lot of our coastal towns are in a terrible place. A terrible place.
Well, we are told he will do a tour of coastal towns. It's being dubbed Burnham on Sea already, of course. But we'll see him travel around. We're still looking at the back door there of Buckingham Palace. So we're some way away before we see the Prime Minister here, Andy Burnham. We expect him just before 1 o'clock, and they're gathering here. But there's feel like an expectant crowd here, Andrew. Looking around for any further names I can recognise. You see Steve Rotherham at the very front there, holding a baby, probably a grandchild. But there's a real feeling here of a rebirth of this party. Steve Rotherham on screen now. He's the mayor of Liverpool City region with a baby. You know, I'm assuming, well, I don't know whose baby that is, but there he is. But there's a feeling, Andrew, here in the street of rebirth, change. The problem they've got, though, is they've wasted really 2 years before they're trying to do anything. Can they get things done?
Yeah, that's going to be the big test, and he's got to hit the ground running. And what are we hearing?
I've got a new fact for you. Peter Reid, the left-wing former England and Everton footballer, is in the crowd outside Downing Street in a cream jacket.
I wouldn't have
can just see him. If you look at the very front there, in the cream jacket with a black T-shirt, that is Peter Reid. If you scan
the one with the sunglasses.
Yeah, with the sunglasses. That is Peter Reid, who played for Everton. So he's an Everton footballer.
Of course, Andy Burnham is a huge Everton fan.
Yes, I'm getting a text here by a former Conservative MP watching GBNews live on our channel. He's telling me he famously got skinned by Maradona in the World Cup defeat in 1986.
Oh dear.
But if you can go along, I can see him now. He's wearing dark glasses, a black T-shirt and a cream jacket.
If there wasn't such a big crowd, we'd get him over and do an interview, but I think we'd get into trouble if we moved from our spot here.
We can't move. And he also, of course, played for Everton, and Andy Burnham is a big Everton fan. This is a northern takeover of 10 Downing Street. How it goes down, though, in the southern seats, now controlled by Labour MPs after the landslide in July, is yet to be seen.
Yeah, absolutely. Very important. But he knows that. And he will say, I bet he uses the phrase, I will govern for all the people and all the country. Don't you think?
Yeah, he will have to say that. We're looking now at talking to Steve Reid is Steve Rotherham, the Liverpool mayor, is Peter Reid, the former footballer. So it is a different group of people here, people who are not used to being maybe around Downing Street, maybe in London as much as other people are. Of course, the former Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, was the MP for Holborn and St Pancras, was criticised as being a North London lawyer. This is certainly a different individual now. Looking along the pictures now,
there's far more people here now than there were for Starmer's departure.
Yes,
because this is the future.
Absolutely.
That's the point.
Absolutely. Looking now on screen, we're approaching, I think, Peter Reid. There's Josh Simons in the blue shirt.
Yeah.
We're looking down.
He's the reason we have a new Prime Minister.
Yes. So the cost of having a new Prime Minister is, and there you see in the back of Peter Reid there in the white jacket, next to Steve Rotherham. He, of course, played for England and Everton. Yeah, we only here because Labour took a punt on someone else to replace Keir Starmer. In the old days, well, only the Tories ever did this. Never happened under Labour.
No.
It wasn't working under Keir Starmer.
No.
It cost £5 million to have by-elections in Greater Manchester and Makerfield. It's a £5 million punt of our tax money on a new Prime Minister.
Because remember when Blair went, he did a deal on timing. There was no by-election, no leadership contest, and Brown took over. It was very orderly. It was a bloodless coup.
It really was, and we'll see how this plays out. Of course, all coups are bloodless until blood starts being spilt, and that blood will start being spilt today. We're expecting 8 members of the cabinet to be kicked out. Many of them we saw lined up earlier. Emily,
we've still got our camera there at Buckingham Palace. We're just waiting. We're hearing that Andy Burnham is very soon going to exit that building and make his way to Downing Street to speak not at that lectern, to speak without a lectern. We'll see whether he keeps his suit on as well. Just to remind our viewers, we've already had 2 resignations, ministerial resignations, haven't we, Chris?
think he'll keep his seat?
Yes, we have. We've seen Patrick Vallance, known to our viewers as the Chief Scientific Officer during the COVID pandemic. He has resigned. Lord Vallance now, of course, and James Timpson,
here we
Lord
are.
Timpson,
Hope,
who was a Justice
Andy
Minister.
Burnham and his wife have left Buckingham Palace. They're waving to the cameras. Sir Michael here in the studio. They're departing Buckingham Palace on their way to Downing Street to become the 4th Prime Minister of King Charles III's reign.
That's right, Emily, and he's just shaking hands there with Sir Clive Alderton, the Principal Private Secretary to the King, who's been working for the King now for 20 years, including when he was Prince of Wales. Sir Clive escorted now Sir Keir Starmer, the former Prime Minister, and up to see the King to tender his resignation, and he's just escorted Andy Burnham to go and become Prime Minister, the King's 4th, the country's 59th Prime Minister. And he's waving goodbye now as they leave the inner quadrangle at Buckingham Palace. We should see them soon coming out of the gates of Buckingham Palace at the front and onto the Mall and to Downing Street, where they should arrive in the next 2 or 3 minutes. We have, of course, the 1st Battalion of the Grenadier Guards still at Buckingham Palace. They've presumably been undergoing their duties. We were watching them arriving and leaving earlier with a band of the Welsh Guards, I think it was. And these are footmen going back in. There's the now new Prime Minister, the King's 4th, the country's 59th, coming out of Buckingham Palace and heading there. Now, he went to see the King, despite what had been briefed. He said about not wearing a suit very often, Emily. He was, of course, as he should be, in a jacket and tie and a suit to see the King. I think it's apposite to remember that at the beginning of Queen Elizabeth II's reign, her first Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, went to see her in a top hat and frock coat. And we've gone from a frock coat, then gradually to a morning suit and stripy trousers, now to a Prime Minister who wants to wear a T-shirt. But presumably he will put on a tie when he's seeing the Sovereign.
I sense that you're describing some sort of decline there, Sir Michael. I'll let people
make their own conclusions.
But yes,
about that.
I mean, the 7th Prime Minister in about a decade. This is quite extraordinary. This is a man, Andy Burnham, who's been out of the House of Commons for a long time. A by-election that was thrust upon him, let's say, or that he was very much seeking from his friend Josh Simons. He managed to win that by-election. He then essentially became the Prime Minister, all very quickly indeed. Keir Starmer standing aside for Andy Burnham. No one in the Labour Party was able to contest him, was able to challenge him. No general election being called, of course. And so this man, Andy Burnham, who's been out of government for over a decade, is now back.
That's right, and as they go down the Mall there and head towards Downing Street, it's worth noting that although constitutionally this is perfectly proper, this change of Prime Minister, there's nothing wrong with it constitutionally. He has that mandate. Politically, he doesn't have any mandate to speak of because he hasn't gone through that baptism of fire, that testing. Even the Conservative Prime Ministers, when they were changed mid-term, they had leadership contests, they had hustings, they had various tests that they had gone through because they'd held high ministerial office as Secretaries of State. Here, that can't be said, and as we were saying earlier, Mr Burnham won't actually have given any mainline tough interviews. He certainly won't have the House of Commons to contend with now until
But I mean,
September.
Sir Michael, we had his podcast with Gary Lineker.
Well, exactly.
What more could we possibly want as the public?
Exactly, and you know, the choices that they make and they have made, they've been able to get away with. Those options are going to be closing quite firmly, I think, on him and his team, and they may be in for a rude awakening because the Westminster press won't put up with avoidance for very long, no matter what the political party is involved, and neither will the House of Commons. And there is a constitutional implication to this chatter about having a number 10 North. It's all very sexy, it creates headlines, it's politically interesting, journalistically interesting, but Constitutionally, whoever the Prime Minister is, he's answerable to the House of Commons, and you have to be available to the Speaker's summons for an urgent question or for a statement at very short notice.
We are now
in Whitehall
watching Sir Michael Andy Burnham arrive at Downing Street, down Whitehall. The Range Rovers, a number of them, multiple Range Rovers, police escort, of course, into Downing Street. We can see on the side there are some protesters there. I believe Just Stop Oil has a presence with all the talk over oil and gas licences that there's been.
Yes.
Lots of rumour on that front.
The police have ordered that there be no amplification.
Sorry, Sir Michael. We are going to throw to Christopher Hope and Andrew Pearce, who are there on number 10 Downing Street as Andy Burnham arrives.
The motorcade is now arriving into Downing Street. We can call him the Prime Minister now because Andy Burnham is our 59th Prime Minister. The motorcade sweeping into Downing Street. If he's getting out that car, he'll walk up the street with his wife by his side, and there will be roars and cheers from Team Burnham, which is on either side of Downing Street. Everyone's craning their necks, and has he kept it? Here's the applause.
Here he comes.
There we are. Here he comes. And he's kept his suit and tie on, I'm pleased to say. Very pleased to say he's kept his suit and tie on.
You see Andy Burnham now greeting supporters as he walks down the street there with his wife Anne-Marie Van Heel. And we've seen he's shaking hands. When Keir Starmer did this, they were all given union flags to wave. That hasn't happened this time. It feels less frankly organised than last time. It's more organic. He's wearing a jacket and tie. His wife, of course, in what looks like a kind of grey-blue dress. He's come straight from the palace where he is now our 7th Prime Minister in the past 10 years. The 6th new Prime Minister in 10 years.
Absolutely extraordinary. And he must be pondering. This was exactly the same reception Keir Starmer had 2 years and 15 days ago, and it had all ended very quickly. He cannot make those same mistakes. And that speech will set out how he's going to do it differently.
And it went wrong for Keir Starmer, and really Andy Burnham can only hope it goes better. This is a massive gamble on red by the Labour Party. From the Coronation Street to Downing Street, here he is crowned Prime Minister of our country. Will it work out? They've got 2.5 years, 3 years at most.
Exactly, and he says he will govern as Labour, authentic Labour. I think that means ever higher taxes.
We'll wait and see. Certainly the measures he's talking about, such as privatising the water companies and others, will cost lots of money.
Yeah, exactly. And is he going to speak from notes, Chris, or is he going to do it from...
Big hug there for Josh Simons, who made way in Makerfield to make that seat available to Andy Burnham.
He is the reason.
Handshakes now. This is a northern takeover of 10 Downing Street by the northern Greater Manchester Mayor, formerly now the Mayor of Makefield, and now our Prime Minister. Hugs there for his team, and many of that team I think were working with him in City Hall. There's Steve Rotherham. Huge hug there. That's the Metro Mayor of Liverpool hugging Andy Burnham.
And they're great mates. They are great mates.
And there is Peter Reid there. He's the former Everton football player. Dark glasses, big hug there from his mate. He can't believe probably that Andy Burnham, a season ticket holder up on the hill, Dickinson Stadium in Liverpool, is now the Prime Minister. Few can believe it. More hugs there from all of his team.
And there's a real affection here because these people really believe he is the genuine thing. Genuine Labour, genuinely authentic Labour, an authentic Labour voice, which is, I think they often suspected Sir Keir Starmer never was.
And Labour hoping he is the Messiah that can save this party.
The Manchester Messiah. You can see the headlines already, can't you?
Can that happen? We'll wait and see. Now he's getting to the end of the line now. Very shortly, he'll walk to his two. Here he comes. So the crowds, the cheers rise now. He's waiting for his wife to go towards him. She'll stand back. And he's crossing the other side now. He's going to keep going.
Is he coming over to GBNews, Chris? That's the key. Is he coming over to the
microphones now for you, Mrs. Carr here. Here we have Andy Burnham, our new Prime Minister.
Thank you.
I have just come from Buckingham Palace, where I have accepted His Majesty the King's invitation to form a government. In doing so, I am acutely conscious that I am the 6th person in the last 10 years to walk up this street, the 7th Prime Minister since 2016, making this a moment for reflection and new resolution. It requires my generation of politicians to raise our game and rise to the new challenge. Britain needs to show the world that we can regain our stability once again. And that is our challenge, to make politics work, to make it work better. I know people at home are fed up with politics. I hear you, and I want to be honest with you. We have not been good enough, and we need to be better. We will be. We will make this moment a circuit breaker for Britain, bringing forward the biggest changes in the last 40 years. A new political model and a new economic model. In the 1980s, Britain took some wrong turns. Political power was centralised, economic power privatised, large parts of the country deindustrialised, and they still haven't recovered. Many feel as though they're still in decline, and they don't have the ability to turn things around. And that's why we will change politics, to make it more collaborative, more about problem solving than point scoring. And we will take power out of here and carry it into every postcode in the land so that they can do more. And in doing more, build a new economy where we put life's essentials back under stronger public control to make them affordable to you again. Reindustrialising Britain, using public procurement to back British industry. Later this year, I will bring forward a new plan for Britain, a 10-year plan, laying out a path from where we are now to where I believe we all want Britain to be, wherever we're coming from, whatever party we support. But I can do something to give people some breathing space now, some help with the cost of living. And I will set out some of those measures starting tomorrow, including how we pay for them. We will help more young people into work by changing the education system and giving them more support, more mental health support. And we will build more council homes. That is the fair and sustainable way to bring the welfare bill down, to meet our fiscal rules and to honour our commitments on defence to our international partners. We will help people to live well, building a more preventative state, investing in people's success rather than paying for failure. And that work starts now. I will soon go through that door behind me and issue my first instruction to end rough sleeping in our country. It's about putting the right values and the right standards at the heart of government. I will put the care of people at the heart of everything I do. I will give this my all, and I ask you all to pull with me. Let's build a new national sense of unity, of common purpose and positivity. Let us make this the moment when Britain starts to believe again, the moment we bring back hope. Thank you very much, everybody.
So that's Andy Burnham speaking. He's announced that there'll be a 10-year plan, which he'll announce later. Tomorrow he's going to announce immediate measures to do with the cost of living crisis. I imagine that has something to do with energy. But his first instruction will be he's going to end rough sleeping throughout the entire country. That's the first instruction when he walks through that famous door as our 59th Prime Minister. Christopher.
I was struck also by a commitment on the welfare budget. He said there, build more council homes to bring down the welfare budget. I guess what it must mean, we're spending a lot of money in B&Bs. So that's an interesting way of looking at the welfare budget.
Yeah, but also where's the money going to come from to build these new council houses? He's talking about the biggest council house building programme since the Second World War. It all costs money. He didn't say anything about tax, nothing about tax at all.
Well, he talked about a new plan for Britain, a 10-year plan, a pathway plan he was set out, and also some more help to be unveiled tomorrow and how to pay for it, Andrew.
But he also acknowledged that it is not good enough, that this is the 6th change of Prime Minister in the last 10 years. He said it's not good enough, we've not been good enough, and that was an acknowledgement that Labour hadn't been good enough either. So he has now set himself a high bar, because 2 years and 15 days ago we had a Prime Minister called Keir Starmer getting exactly this applause, and he was gone 2 years, 15 days later.
For me, it's a direct plea for the centre ground, like Tony Blair did in 97. He's appealing there for support to make this country better. He thinks he can get the support of the Tories, Reform, Lib Dems. We'll wait and see how that plays out.
He also, you've got to give it to him, he's a better speaker than Keir Starmer, he's a better communicator.
And you see he's waving now, he's going around the crowds now, waving.
He's with his wife now.
Unbelievably, here he goes. He's dreamt about this for ages.
The iconic photograph, the first one of the Prime Minister and his wife on the threshold of number 10 Downing Street. We all have to wish them well. Because the country needs to get a lot better, and there we are. They're going inside, and they'll be greeted by the Cabinet Secretary.
He's wearing his suit there. Looks a bit ruffled up after he was sitting down in his car. He's got both buttons. So maybe not used to wearing a suit so much as a T-shirt and his usual on a jacket. But there you have it, our new Prime Minister
straight into
with his wife.
He signed a nuclear code, and he's going to give an instruction to end rough sleeping all over the United Kingdom. Well, good luck with that.
And we're now looking inside the hall.
So there's the Cabinet Secretary. She's called Dame Antonio Romero. She is the first woman Cabinet Secretary, and she will have been working very closely with Andy Burnham in the last 3 or 4 weeks on the transition into government.
Now, we don't often get this shot. It's
normally a still photograph.
That's right. So now we're seeing here behind the scenes. The door opens. That's the main hall. He's greeting now all the team around Andy Burnham, the team who will be supporting him in Downing Street. I'm looking for some faces. I don't recognise many faces there. Most of them there are civil servants.
And do you know, he's probably desperate for a cup of tea.
Yes, he will be. He won't believe what's happening to him, frankly. It's not where he thought he'd be a year or so ago, I doubt.
Even in May, when he was thought he was the May elections were disastrous, and that projected him into the by-election.
Now outside in the street, now the camera's with us now outside in the street. You can see everyone's hugging. Steve Rotherham's talking about his baby again. I assume it must be a grandchild of some sort, but complete change of cast list. There's one of his senior aide there, Kevin, walking past me.
This is the guy in the red T-shirt?
Yes, he's very senior. Yes, you're seeing here Sarah Brown there and Grace Pritchard from the press side. A whole new team here we weren't expecting to see.
And that comms team, the all-female comms team, Starmer had a big problem with his communications operation, didn't he? Four press secretaries in 2 years.
Walking past us now is Steve Rotherham with his the baby there, fast asleep, enjoying it all.
Missing it all, missing the history.
But the ministers, there are no MPs here, really. I kind of no MPs here. They'll be waiting for that phone call, I think. It seems to
all the MPs are back in their office. All the ministers are back in their offices, sitting by their phones, waiting, praying that it's not a phone call but around 2 o'clock, because that means they're fired. They want the phone call around 4 o'clock.
Your baby, Steve?
Grandchild. Bless him.
Steve Rotherham there, he's the Mayor of Liverpool City Region. He's with a grandchild, not his baby. We'll try and get him for a chat when he comes away.
But I love the fact the baby has voted with his eyes, sleeping the whole way through it. Isn't that fabulous?
Yes, we're able to get him when he comes over across to us. But yes, but you're looking at it's a scene here of a party.
Well, it's like a jamboree, isn't it? It's like a jamboree.
They've made no choices yet in government. I mean, the cost of ending rough sleeping, that will cost lots of money, Andrew.
Well,
so already he's spending money.
Well, there'll be local councils will probably have to pick up the bill.
Right.
I would have said.
Yes, he did it in Manchester, but was criticised because what it did, he said, I'll end rough sleeping in Manchester. So many homeless went to Manchester and got a free bed.
They did.
The problem he's got is yes, you can end rough sleeping, but it will cost a lot of money.
Yes, it will. And of course, particularly in our bigger cities, rough sleeping is a big issue. He's also tomorrow going to announce help directly for the cost of living crisis, and he says he'll tell us how he's going to pay for it. I think that will be something to do with energy bills, Chris.
Yeah, you might expect that. He can't go outside of the manifesto he didn't sign up to in July 2024.
Yeah.
So he's got simply to work out what he can do within the confines of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought it was a good speech.
Yeah, and
it appeared to be without notes.
I can't tell you if he read it from the screen or not. I can't see from our standpoint, but it was a good speech. He did connect.
Yeah.
He was trying. He's really channeling to me is Tony Blair.
Yeah.
So I want to govern for the whole country.
Yeah.
He's not divisive, and he's trying to connect with people in a way we haven't seen under Keir Starmer.
I know, and also, and that acknowledgement that the system has failed. It's completely failed. We're on our 7th Prime Minister in 10 years. What a joke. What a joke this country's become. He's got to get some stability.
Well,
and he was acknowledging that it's been a failure of Labour as much as the Tories.
He said in the words, effectively, people are sick of the change of government.
Sick of politicians.
And this carries on. He can't carry on that way. But he says the biggest change in 40 years. He's got 2.5 years to do it, Andrew. That's the challenge.
Exactly. And he's also got backbenchers who are very restive, and we'll be waiting to see if there's a bounce in the polls. There was one poll which showed Labour and Reform neck and neck, but the last poll I saw, Reform was still comfortably ahead.
Yes, I think there were two where it's neck and neck, but the poll of polls has Reform still 5 points ahead, so it won't take a while before it trickles through to the major polls we look at.
So the important work of government begins.
That's right, looking around any further. But this is the high point, I think, for this team around Andy Burnham. It won't get any better than this because politics is about failing, frankly. It is how you fail, and the failure is in front of them. And we do wish, of course, one has to wish any new government well, Andrew.
Of course.
But it's how they make their choices will define so much.
And I wonder if there'll be any contact with Starmer. If Starmer just melts away now. So quickly, the last Prime Minister is forgotten.
And the team around him too, and many of those, we're expecting as many as 8 sackings from Keir Starmer's government out of 22 or 23 members of that cabinet.
My understanding is some of them have already written their resignation letters.
Yes, well, they will have done.
They wrote them yesterday.
Yes.
And some of them, other cabinet ministers were told, make sure you're in London today because clearly they're going to get an enhancement or stay where they are.
Exactly. It's not kind of letter you want to write in a hurry, and these letters often are reflecting on a 2-year period in office. You want to make sure it's right because it's on the record. It's how you judge yourself. You can't rush it. You can see why. I'm looking to my right, see if we can grab
we haven't seen either. We didn't see today. We didn't see West Streeting either, did we?
No. Well, I've seen no members of no MPs out there at all.
No.
It really does feel like a takeover by the team around him in Greater Manchester here in central London. He's got to govern for the whole country. That's his challenge.
Yeah.
Starting, I think, with Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland in that order.
Yeah, and of course Anna Sarwar was down in London. I think you talked to him the other day, didn't you?
Yeah, on Friday.
And of course Anna Sarwar, the Scottish Labour leader, was the one who called for Keir Starmer to go. It looked like a coup was going on then with West Streeting, but that was the coup that fizzled out.
We have spotted one of the only MPs we've seen is Rosie Winterton. She is here, and she may be a friend of...
Well, she's in the House of Lords, of course.
Of course, yeah. She's
in the House of Lords. Yeah,
and of course, the first time this government will be scrutinised in Parliament will be in the House of Lords this week. They're sitting all week, so...
They'll be taking questions.
Well, about policy.
But they'll have to get ministers sorted out very quickly because they may not be ministers for much longer.
We'll have to keep watching closely.
And we've already seen 2 ministers in the Lords resign already.
But we heard overnight for the areas we're seeing Andy Burnham look closely to. There'll be more stable, responsible government, he's promised. More on the cost of living. Cutting energy bills has been mooted. A cap on bus fares around the country, 11 to 16-year-olds, that's being mooted in Manchester. That could be applied across the country. Unfree. The big issue he talked about in his Times interview today was this issue of the income tax-free threshold.
Yes.
£12,570. That is being talked about in Makerfield. Why am I earning more and being taxed?
I know, and of course Rachel Reeves had frozen that till 2028, and then it was extending that freeze to 2030, which means a lot more people are going to be dragged into income tax, including, Christopher, a lot of pensioners will be paying income tax for the first time, and pensioners always vote.
And that's coming up, of course, on the steps of when Andy Burnham met with the team in Makerfield. Also, he wants to put Thames Water back in state hands, tackle social care, maybe oil and gas drilling too.
Emily, we're going to go back to you while the jamboree continues here.
Dick staff, do let us know if you see or hear anything on the ground outside Downing Street. So there you go. Andy Burnham has become our next Prime Minister, the fourth under the reign of His Majesty the King, Charles III, of course, and the seventh Prime Minister in just over a decade. Are you still paying attention? Yes, he promises a circuit breaker for Britain. Reminds me of the pandemic. I'm not sure I want to hark back to those times. But what's going on behind that door in number 10? There's no hanging about. He has to make some key decisions now, Andy Burnham does. He has to, including writing the nuclear submarine letters of last resort. What on earth he would do if we were under attack, that last resort moment. So Michael Ellis is here with me in the studio, former Attorney General, and we also have the former Labour councillor for Tower Hamlets, Amina Ali. Thank you very much indeed, Sir Michael Ellis. You're here with me. So what exactly happens now? He's gone in, he's been greeted by number 10 staff, he's had the fanfare outside, he's delivered his speech to the nation without a lectern, he was wearing a suit. What does he have to do now? There's no hanging about.
Well, can I say that he said that he was going to, the first instruction was going to be to end rough sleeping or something like that, but that will not actually be his first instruction, because one of the things he's first going to have to do is get a briefing from the military, and that's probably from Air Chief Marshal Sir Richard Knighton, who's the Chief of the Defence Staff, because every incoming Prime Minister first of all has to understand what the national security situation in this country is, and one of the instructions I think he's going to have to give is about what happens with Iran, because the Americans will want to know whether he gives his permission for US military forces to use British sovereign bases, both in England and RAF Fairford, for example, and in Diego Garcia, the British Indian Ocean territory, the Chagos Islands. So that's a decision that may actually come into play as early as this evening. So he has to give those instructions to the military. He also will be given a security briefing. We don't know anything about that, of course, but we can guess that it will include such things as we've heard, the nuclear position and so on. And there is a tradition about that and about writing letters to captains of Royal Navy nuclear submarines. But after that, relatively short briefing, because he can be given more detailed briefings later. And after being shown around the key rooms in number 10, including the famous cabinet room, where there are chairs around that oval, that long sort of coffin-shaped table. It's interesting to note that that cabinet table, only one of the chairs has arms, and that's the chair that the Prime Minister sits in. All the rest don't have any arms. And it's been, Sir George...
That's a hierarchical thing.
It is hierarchical. Sir George Downing built that street in the 1680s.
Perhaps Andy, being man of the people, will remove the arms.
Maybe everybody else will have arms and he will sit on a stool or something. I don't know. But Sir George Downing built Downing Street in the 1680s. Since about 1735, it's been used as the Prime Minister's principal location. And this is very relevant to Andy Burnham, because he's saying he won't really use it so much. He'll be the first since the 1730s to say, well, I'm not using it that much. King George II gifted it to the Prime Ministers in perpetuity. It actually is a property belonging to the Crown. The problem that Andy is going to have is that he needs to be near the House of Commons. His own Labour MPs, never mind anybody else, will want him near the House of Commons. So will the Speaker of the House. And so positioning himself up north, whether it be, in Manchester or anywhere else, is going to be difficult constitutionally, because the Prime Minister is answerable to the House of Commons. And the Speaker will say, I want you within within shouting distance if I summon for a urgent question, for a statement, and the like. That's where the fulcrum of public life, of political life, is in this country. There has to be somewhere. People will say, well, it's all very centralised. Well, so it is in every country. I mean, people have to go all over the United States to get to Washington, of course, and they have to travel through several time zones, to get to your capital in many countries.
I suppose sending civil servants from London up to Manchester isn't exactly
that's right. That sort of
going
thing.
to change necessarily
the power balance. It will be a logistical challenge, and I'm a little sceptical about how this number 10 North is going to work.
It's a gimmick, in my opinion.
I think it is.
Shall we bring in the former Labour councillor for Tower Hamlets, Amina Ali? Amina, thank you very much indeed. Now, if you don't mind me saying, I think you said before that perhaps Keir Starmer lost you your seat on the Tower Hamlets Council. Do you think Andy Burnham might win it back for you?
I hope so. Yeah,
you hope so, or you think so?
No, I think he actually will. I think what happened, unfortunately, in the local elections, as you saw, is that many Labour councillors lost their seats across the country. And a lot of that had to do, unfortunately, with Keir Starmer and the fact that he was quite unpopular to the nation. We're seeing so far that Andy Burnham is quite popular. He's boosted up our polls ratings at the moment. I think that he's more relatable. Many of the people on the doorsteps were telling us that he wasn't relatable, Keir Starmer. So I'm hoping that, this time round, in the next 4 years, after we have a local election, that Andy Burnham, if he hopefully will be able to change things for local councillors. Because we do need Labour council on the grounds in many of our cities and towns.
Yeah, of course, the local elections were one of the main reasons why Keir Starmer is out of the job and Andy Burnham is now the Prime Minister. But is there a lack of trust there, Amina? Because he hasn't gone to the public. Yes, he went to the people of Makerfield, but that's a very, very small proportion of the wider general public. He hasn't called an election. He hasn't really spoken to journalists besides very friendly people. I mean, Gary Lineker is not a journalist. I could say he's a broadcaster, though, but very much friendly and to the left. And he's going to be away from the House of Commons all summer now without taking questions from the opposition or indeed from his own parliamentarians. Do you think the public are going to look at that and think, oh, that's all right, Andy Burnham, he can just become the Prime Minister in this way? Or do you think there's going to be real questions? It's going to be very difficult. I mean, the bounce hasn't been that big so far. No,
you're right. Actually, you're right. The bounce hasn't been that big. I was one of those Labour activists that actually would have welcomed a leader debate. I think we needed that to be able to see what policies he was going to bring in so we could sort of understand that. And many of the Conservatives actually did have those debates, so people kind of knew when there was a change of political power.
So you were disappointed that you didn't see other people throw their hat in the ring?
I was quite disappointed.
They all seemed to get a bit scared, didn't they? They walked out of it.
I think there are bad signs, I'm afraid. I don't want to inject a dose of reality into Andy Burnham's first day.
No, please do.
But I agree with Amina about the absence of a hustings. And look, he does show signs of wishing to avoid scrutiny. When he's not given any interviews to speak of, I mean, he chooses Reddit to do some sort of interview process, which, of course, is heavily...
OK, so, Michael, I'm going to have to interrupt because we're going to head straight back to Downing Street because Christopher Hope is there with some news for us. Christopher?
Emily, thank you. Joining me now is Dale Vince, who's a Labour Party donor and the founder of Ecotricity, an eco-friendly company. Dale Vince, how is business reacting to the appointment of Andy Burnham as Prime Minister?
I don't actually know. I don't spend a lot of time talking to businesses, but I imagine it's positive because, he's done the essentials, says he'll stick to the fiscal rules. I think there'll be a big investment in Britain's industry. He talks about reindustrialisation, stuff like that. I just think that it's impossible to be negative about this. We're going to see change now, and I think it's going to overwhelmingly be good change.
Is that change more taxes being paid by people like you and maybe me and others?
I don't see that myself, but I think our tax system needs rebalancing. And what people call a wealth tax is actually just a rebalancing. Capital gains tax is half the rate of income tax. Why is that?
So you expect wealth taxes to go up?
I expect capital gains tax to go up. That's not a wealth tax, is it? It's a tax on
wealth.
Well, it's a tax on income, not wealth. It's earned at the point of sale. It's a capital gain. That's income.
He's already committed to reshaping the policy towards Israel and Gaza. You're a huge supporter, of course, of Gaza. Do you welcome that?
do. Absolutely. I think it's been crying out to be done for decades, actually, but since certainly Russia invaded Ukraine, we've had the most outrageous double standards in the West. 20 rounds of sanctions now on Russia, not a single round on Israel. Far worse things being done in Gaza than being done in Ukraine. You can't argue with that.
So what do you want to see, Andy Burnham? What's his new policy? What should it be towards Israel?
We actually need a trade embargo. We need sanctions in the same way we have on Russia. They've invaded and occupied Palestine now for 50 years or something like that, in defiance of UN resolutions, in defiance of international law. Netanyahu's a wanted war criminal. We should not be trading with them.
But how will that go down with the Jewish community here? You're describing a sort of hostile attitude towards Israel.
How did the 20 rounds of sanctions against Russia go down with the Russian community? I have no idea. I don't think it matters. I think Israel is a Jewish state, but so many people that are Jewish around the world don't support the atrocities they're committing in Palestine.
And on net zero, we think Ed Miliband's moved from his department, where he's been driving forward net zero, made it a bit of a dirty word, you think?
I do. Yeah, I do. I think I can understand why, because there have been spending commitments made to things that won't move the dial on either carbon or our economy. Vast sums of money when we're crying out for money in other places.
And he may go to foreign affairs. We'll see how that plays out. Do you want more oil and gas drilling in the North Sea? The Rosebank, Jackdaw fields, we're expecting maybe some announcement this week, maybe if the new PM goes to Scotland.
I think it would be a mistake. That's my view. It was a major manifesto pledge not to drill. There's not really, there's maybe 1,000 jobs to be gained there or something like that. There's maybe a year's worth of oil and gas to be gained. There's no real economic growth or opportunity. I think if it happens, it'll be just to quieten the right-wing voices in the politics and media.
And Dale Vince, I saw you in the audience in the TC Conference Centre last Friday, quite prominently there in the third or fourth row, listening to Andy Burnham. You're here now in Downing Street. Are you hoping for a job in his government?
I'm not.
You're just an interested observer.
I am, but we've created a bunch of policy ideas that we're going to share with the new government shortly, and 4 major policies that could triple GDP growth. That's what I care about, a better country to live in.
And what are they?
Energy market reform, tax reform, a national house building programme, which we already know Andy is interested in, and a national solar rooftop programme, 4 of them, and the tripling of GDP growth, in case I didn't say that already. I'm sure I did.
But your party is gambling all on red. They're gambling on a guy who wasn't an MP barely, or just over a month ago now. He's been in Greater Manchester for a long time, doing well by all accounts in Greater Manchester. Can he deliver nationally for all of the country rather than just a certain part of it?
I believe he can. He already talks about north, south, east and west rather than Westminster. I think he can.
And just finally, when you meet him, do you think he can do it? Looking back, is he someone who can deliver? He says he's very relaxed, but is that enough?
Well, he is relaxed. I've known him a little while. Worked with him in Manchester on a northwest energy study, for example. He's committed. He's capable. I believe he can do it.
And business shouldn't be alarmed by the possibility of more taxes.
No, I don't see that at all. I don't see a threat to business from Andy Burnham government.
Thank you for joining us, sir. Great to see you there. Thank you, sir. And there we have it there. So donor, business supporters, Dale Vince there from Ecotricity, supporters of Andy Burnham, of Labour, donors to the party, they are also welcoming the arrival of the Prime Minister. But we'll wait and see, of course. This is probably the high point in his popularity. We'll see how it plays out in coming weeks and months.
Okay, Christopher Hope, thank you very much indeed. Our political editor there in Downing Street. With me in the studio is still Sir Michael Ellis and former Labour councillor Amina Ali. We are going straight now, though, to Reform UK spokesperson for Home Affairs, Zia Youssef, who I presume has been listening to Andy Burnham and what he has to say as the incoming Prime Minister. Zia, he promises that this morning will be a circuit breaker for Britain. He says we need breathing space now, and he's providing that. He says he wants to build more council homes, and he says his first instruction will be to end rough sleeping.
Do you remember when Keir Starmer stood in that exact place and said, change begins today? It's exactly the same thing. Andy Burnham is simply Keir Starmer in jeans. In some cases, he's even worse. And obviously, Starmer became synonymous with U-turns, U-turn after U-turn after U-turn, over really important things that impact a lot of people's lives in this country. Prior to him becoming Prime Minister, this is a man who does not believe in anything. He's completely an empty vessel. He doesn't know what a woman is. He's very much, 1 minute he's pro-immigration, the next minute he's concerned about levels of immigration. And, what we've also seen since, even in the last few days, you may have seen some briefings to the point where even the President of the United States was tweeting somewhat triumphantly that Andy Burnham was going to start drilling, going to allow new licenses for drilling in the North Sea. He's already U-turned on that, and there won't be any new licenses for drilling in the North Sea, much to the shame and frankly embarrassment for this country, given how much people are struggling to see real wages grow, struggling under the weight of energy bills because of the crazy religious crusade around net zero that began with the Tories and has continued under Labour. So this is a man who does not believe in anything. He's already lost control of his parliamentary party that has some elements within it that have at least tried to, for example, delay indefinite leave to remain grants to the Boris wave of migrants, for example. But those elements are being completely overwhelmed now.
You say he doesn't...
by the broader backbench MP group. So what we're going to see is more open borders and more stagnation for the British economy.
OK, well, you say he doesn't believe in anything, but he did set out what he believes in, and those things are decentralising power. So devolution, that's one of his buzzwords, that what he wants to do. Power in every postcode, not just in Westminster. That will go down well with quite a lot of the British public. He also wants to reindustrialise Britain using public procurement to back British industry. Again, something quite a lot of people would like to see in this country. So those are a couple of things that he believes in.
Well, if you're talking about reindustrialising Britain, what does that mean? Well, we have to reverse the process of deindustrialisation of Britain that has happened over the last 20 years over successive Labour and Tory governments. And that is, for example, the shocking cost of energy. We have amongst the highest costs of energy on the planet. And has he got a plan to do that? No, he's still going to continue with the mad religious net zero crusade. So nothing is going to change there. We're going to see continued increases in taxation, including on the most productive people within society. All this talk of things like a wealth tax, all that's going to do is make investment in Britain even less attractive. We'll see what he's going to do with capital gains tax. It looks like that's going to go up too. So what does reindustrialising Britain mean? It means reversing what we've seen over the last 20 years. What Burnham is talking about is accelerating it. And in terms of the first point about devolution, again, what does that mean? Is he going to truly devolve, for example, the powers of taxation to local areas? I mean, that would be something, that would be a major change constitutionally. There is absolutely no mandate to do that. Maybe it is something that the British people want, but I go back to a point that Reformer made time and time again. He has no mandate. 0.03% of the British public voted for him. And I'm afraid if you look at the history of this, when prime ministers come in, having not been voted for based on putting a manifesto in front of the British people, and when they are vacuous and are simply trying to people please, what happens is they come in, they give a really good vibesy set of speeches, and then reality kicks in, they tank in the polls and they get replaced. And that's why Reform are saying, if you really believe in these things, Andy, then put it to the British people, write down your plan, put it in a manifesto, let's have a general election.
Well, Andy Burnham is certainly ambitious. He said in his speech that he's setting out a 10-year plan towards the end of this year.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, people have been struggling now, and what they want to see is change quickly. So for sure, you do want leaders that are thinking long term. That is obviously true, but there are so many things that can be done immediately. I mean, look, one of the most outrageous things that Andy Burnham has already said is he wants to increase foreign aid as a percentage of GDP. I mean, how on earth you can look at the tens of billions that have been spent in recent years on foreign aid, including to countries like Pakistan, supposedly to buy British people, quote, soft power, when Pakistan is refusing brazenly even to take back the Rochdale monster, Shabir Ahmed, who is a Pakistani national. And Burnham, instead of saying we're going to cut foreign aid basically to zero, which is the Reform policy, at least for the time being, until British people's lives start to improve, he's saying he wants to increase it. And this is my point. He's everything to everybody at this stage. I'm afraid reality is about to come crashing down on him.
Yeah, we need politicians who are willing to be unpopular, at least for a time, to get things done. I do want to ask you about a story that you've been talking about a lot online, and this is David Lammy, slightly separate to our Andy Burnham conversation, but interesting nonetheless. David Lammy taking legal action to block the publication of crime rates among foreign nationals. There's been a lot of people who do want to see this data for England and Wales. Your accusation is that this is a cover-up from David Lammy and the government.
Well, it obviously is a cover-up by David Lammy and the Labour government. It was also a cover-up from the previous Tory government. I mean, it's extraordinary now to see the Shadow Justice Secretary for the Tories and many former Tory ministers who were in power for 14 years could easily, at the stroke of a pen, have released this data so that it was a norm, and then it would be much more difficult for a left-wing government like Labour to stop publishing it. They never did. Why? Because the Tories and the Labour Party flooded this country from migrants, many of them unvetted. To the degree we have got some data in this country, we've seen, for example, Afghans are somewhere around 20 times more likely to be charged with sex offences, for example. We can look at other European countries that do reveal this data. And based on that, I think it's pretty clear why both the Tories and the Labour Party, when they were in government, do not want to publish this data. The Information Commissioner, to their credit, the ICO has said it does need to be published, and now David Lammy's literally spending taxpayers' money on trying to stop it being published. It's time to come clean about what the real impact on crime in this country is as a result of mass immigration.
I will put what the Ministry of Justice has said. They say that the cost of providing the information would be disproportionate and that some of the data could lead to the identification of individuals in breach of their rights to privacy if it were to be published. But yes, the Information Watchdog did reject both of those claims, so we'll see what happens there. Zia Youssef, thank you very much indeed for your time. Reform UK spokesperson for Home Affairs there. Now it is time to cross over to Tom Harwood, my co-host and GB News' deputy political editor. Tom, a lot will be going on behind that big black door, number 10 Downing Street. Tell us what might be happening right at this minute.
Yes, of course, we saw those remarkable images, that rare view inside the front door to number 10 Downing Street as Andy Burnham walked in and was welcomed by the permanent staff there, the civil service, who are apolitical in the main and operate under whoever is Prime Minister. So he'll have been shown to the rooms that he might want to use. Different Prime Ministers inside the building behind me choose different rooms to work out of. Some prefer to work out of the Cabinet Room. Margaret Thatcher famously liked to use a large room upstairs known as the Thatcher Room. Now, it wasn't, of course, when she moved in, as her big study. And other Prime Ministers have preferred to use smaller rooms downstairs. So no doubt there'll be some politicking about the furniture arrangements. But ultimately, the big story this afternoon is who is going to make up Andy Burnham's government. There are reports already that Ed Miliband has said a resignation speech, has made a resignation speech to his Department of Energy Security and Net Zero. A farewell speech, I think I should say. Seemingly, he thinks he might well be saying goodbye to that department. Perhaps he already knows that he is going to be offered another job, a big job. Of course, reportedly, Ed Miliband was a key player in making sure that Andy Burnham was able to get to this position of becoming Prime Minister, working behind the scenes on trying to persuade Keir Starmer that it was his time to go and trying to engineer that pathway for the Mayor of Greater Manchester to become a Member of Parliament and eventually Prime Minister. Could he be offered Foreign Secretary? That is the rumour doing the rounds currently. And then there's the big question of the Chancellor, a massive indication of whether this government will be significantly to the left on issues like tax and spend. Well, some of those great offices of state, those so-called great offices of state, those being the Prime Minister, the Foreign Secretary, the Chancellor of the Exchequer and the Home Secretary, we are expecting those to be the first announcements. So, of course, we know who the Prime Minister is, but those other three great offices of state, we are expecting to be the first announcements here as this afternoon goes on, as those first appointments are made to this new government. And they'll be walking down the street, down Downing Street behind me here. We'll no doubt see if we can shout some things to those potential cabinet ministerial positions as they approach this street. But we've also heard of some junior ministerial resignations already. Before the former Prime Minister Keir Starmer resigned even, we heard of 2 ministerial resignations. We may well hear of cabinet resignations before we hear of those appointments. And that's because generally behind the scenes a conversation is had between the new Prime Minister and a currently serving Cabinet Minister saying, I don't want you in my Cabinet. We have heard that perhaps up to 7 Cabinet Ministers may well be culled, a proper night of the long knives, if you will. And if that does happen, well, then it's likely that many of those people will want to go out on their own terms, issue their own resignation statements. So we're expecting the resignations first, the appointments second, and if there's silence over anything, if this is taking a bit longer than perhaps was expected, well, it could be that someone doesn't want to be moved or refuses a position that they are offered. That's the beauty of a reshuffle. It's not final until it's final. No matter how meticulously Andy Burnham has planned these next few hours over the last few weeks, there could always be someone, somewhere, who puts a stick in the gear.
Take one person to refuse a job for the reshuffle to have to be shuffled once again, for the playing cards to be shuffled again. Tom, we're going to leave it there for now. We'll be back with you very shortly indeed. But just back to my panel here in the studio, Sir Michael Ellis and former Labour councillor in Tower Hamlets, Amina Ali. Amina, with all this shuffling going on, the key positions that a lot of us are concerned about are, of course, Chancellor of the Exchequer. It looks highly likely that Rachel Reeves is not staying in that position. Shabana Mahmood mooted as the potential next Chancellor.
Yeah, well, I've actually been very impressed with Shabana in the Home Office. I think she's been very strong. She's been very clear about changes to policy around immigration, which I agree with a lot of her policies that she's changed on immigration. I think she would be quite good as a Chancellor. I think she's fearless, and we need a Chancellor that's fearless as well, and a Chancellor that's able to quickly understand the economic situation of the country and get their head around it. I think she's bright enough to be able to do that.
It's interesting you say you sing the praises of Shabana Mahmood, because she's got a lot of heat from the left in the party over immigration. They don't want to see these strict policies on deportations, on visas, on work visas, on social care visas, on asylum, etc., on hotels, accommodation, all of that. So you're saying actually you do need someone strong?
Yes, we do, because the reality is, look, we do need immigration in this country. We're going to quickly talk about immigration. We do need immigration. Immigration's been good. However, it has been out of control. And I think she's been a breath of fresh air that's come in on the left and said, you know what, this is a problem. Labour for a very long time would never talk about immigration, always sidetracked immigration. She's come in and taken it by the bull by the horns and said, look, we need reform in this area. And she's been quite bold with some of the reform that she's said that we need to change and happen in immigration. Yes, there might be some on the left, the far left or whatever, who might not be happy with that. But the reality is you have to govern and make decisions that benefit the country. And so far, mass immigration at the rate it is, uncontrolled illegal immigration, is not benefiting this country. And I think that's really important. So whoever goes into the Home Office, if she is replaced from the Home Office, I'm hoping does not reverse any of that and actually is able to continue with that line, because we do need to look at mass illegal immigration and be able to tackle that problem. It is a problem.
Now, there's been, as we were talking to Zia Youssef, the Reform's Home Affairs spokesperson, Amina, saying that there's a bit of a cover-up going on in terms of the crime rates being published for foreign nationals. The sense there that he says David Lammy is probably worried about what they may show. What do you think to that?
Well, I don't know the internet too much about the details. I don't think...
Do we need transparency there?
There has to be transparency. I don't believe that every single immigrant that comes to this country is committing crimes. There are people that come in who actually are law-abiding citizens and don't commit crimes.
Well, I hope so.
Yeah, there are. I think maybe people are more worried about some of the kind of stories that have come out about immigrants committing crimes and it being a problem for cohesion in the country. I think maybe that could be a problem that people are worried about, and cohesion is really important. For example, somebody whose parents came years ago as migrants to this country, for the first time in a very long time, I do feel worried in Britain for myself. I mean, I'm legal, I was born here, grew up here, but people are, everybody's been painted with the same brush, if I'm being really honest with you. It really has affected cohesion in places like Tower Hamlets, inner cities, that maybe a lot of journalists don't go down to and don't visit. There is a real worry about the way of social cohesion between different communities, and I think
this is what happens when people see that it's been so out of control over so many years. You don't want everyone tarnished with the same brush. So, Michael, just some thoughts there on the shape-up of this cabinet. I mean, do you think he's going to get it done quickly, or is he going to
probably
spend his time, go into the evening?
He's had enough time, I think, to think about it.
Well,
I mean, so I suspect...
He hasn't had to run a leadership leadership contest, take part in a contest.
He hasn't had to do anything else, prepare for interviews. I mean, most of the time he's either been interviewed by Gary Lineker or Reddit or something. So he's probably going to begin his reshuffle quite soon, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's mostly finished by early evening. But there's two factors here that it appears to me to be relevant with Andy Burnham as the new Prime Minister. First of all, I do think he's nervous of scrutiny, and I think that's a bad sign going forward, because he's shown every indication at this point to do everything he can to avoid scrutiny. Parliamentary scrutiny, journalistic scrutiny, and every other type of scrutiny. So if he thinks that's going to be able to carry on, that's a bad sign going forward. Secondly, there are early signs that he wants to move to the far left in many ways. Removing Shabana Mahmood from the Home Office is a way of saying that he can change her policies in the Home Office, and that and the other obsessions, for example, that the Labour Party tears itself apart over, for example, on Israel, the derangement that exists in many cases with focusing on that. There are things here at home that are actually relevant to voters who put the politicians into power, and they don't all concern the obsessions with Israel. For example, if he does wish to further penalise Israel for defending itself from constant attack, if he does wish to do that, there is such a thing as World Trade Organization rules, which say that you can't do that. You can't have trade restrictions between countries which are members of the WTO, and the UK is a member of the World Trade Organization. By the way, it's also against American law, as one or two other countries are finding. If we were to take action against Israel unilaterally like that, we would come up against President Trump very quickly. And not only Trump, 38 of the American states have their own state laws, which would mean that they would impose sanctions on the UK if we imposed unilateral sanctions against Israel. So there are responsibilities here. It's very easy for people not in power, Andy Burnham prior to a couple of moments ago, to say things, but there are proper responsibilities and consequences. And David Lammy trying to block, it is extraordinary, frankly, going to court to try and block the transparency of information. I think he's going to come a cropper there, would be my guess.
On the foreign national crime rates.
On the foreign national crime rates, I have to say, all you have to do is point to the fact that other Western European countries do publish their foreign national crime rates.
That's a very good point. Yes,
and why shouldn't we, if other countries do in Western Europe?
Yes, and if there's nothing to hide, then, you know, why not? We're going to have to wrap up that conversation just for now, Sir Michael, because we have a Green Party activist, Ashok Kumar, on the line. Ashok, I understand you don't have too long, so we'll get very quickly to this. What do you make of this, then? What does this mean for the Green Party? The Greens have had quite a lot of success in the local elections. They seem to be down a little on the old popularity ratings, the polling. Is Andy Burnham sort of eating up some of that vote?
Look, there is about Burnham bounce. No doubt. Like anyone who comes in, it would be surprising if there wasn't. He's saying all the right things, and he talks about neoliberalism. You know, your earlier guest said, that he wouldn't have the power. We're already seeing people say, he wouldn't have the power to do sanctions. That's preposterous. There's been thousands of sanctions between countries since the foundation of the WTO in 1997. It's not restricted. Those 39 states in America don't supersede. It's called the separation of powers in the U.S. Constitution. They don't supersede the U.S. government. So the idea that that would be restricted would undermine the entire 40 years of trade law, international trade law.
Okay, Ashok, back to domestic issues.
Yes, sure. The second question is the international issues are central here. Part of the reason why he lost was because of how bad Starmer was on the genocide, and we haven't seen any concrete proposals from Burnham. There's a lot of nice words, but not a lot of action that breaks from Starmerism.
Ashok, the idea of a genocide is very much contested. What do you think? Do you think Andy Burnham, on issues to do with nationalisation, on issues to do with green issues, on perhaps immigration, there's lots of talk of him sort of watering down some of those tough new immigration reforms led by Shabana Mahmood in the Home Office. Do you think that the Green Party will become less and less relevant?
I don't know how, because on renationalization, he hasn't said he's reported renationalization. He says he wants more public control. More public control does not mean renationalization. It's just the same thing, but slightly more palatable, because 80%, 85% of the country supports renationalizing water and energy. that's still neoliberalism. He says he's against neoliberalism, but now he's saying he's going to open up for more oil and gas in the North Sea. We see just today Trump tweeting out on Truth Social, writing out on Truth Social, that the people are celebrating that he's going to do this. So is that more neoliberalism if we're looking out for the interests of profits over the planet? No, it is neoliberalism. He says he's pro-business. It's exactly that sort of pro-business
neoliberalism
mindset.
term is just so
Yes.
it's sort of a cliche buzzword now that sort of left-wingers always put out to say how dreadful right-wing politics is. Should we just talk about free market economics, perhaps?
Yeah, free market economics is the reason why 1 in 4 adults in this country have less than 100 pounds in their pocket. Free market economics is why we have 15 million people living in poverty. Free market economics is why we have 50 families owning more than 50% of the wealth in this country.
I think historians of socialism might dispute that capitalism is to blame for poverty.
Economics. No, this is pretty mainstream economics. There was a period in which
it's not mainstream economics.
No, it is. No. There's a period in which when we moved from a peasant society into capitalism, you did see an upliftment from people's living standards, of course. But neoliberalism, which really started in the 1970s but was applied here in the 1980s, did lead to purchasing power collapsing, infrastructure collapsing, real wages falling. This isn't ideological. This is the empirical evidence is overwhelming that a small number of people have been able to accumulate an enormous amount of wealth, 50 families owning more than 50% of the wealth in this country, while the vast majority of people have smaller wages, but paying larger and larger amounts to landlords, fewer access to the labor market. Infant mortality in this country, in some parts of this country, is actually rising. We're the only country in the G20 in which we can actually say that.
It's quite interesting you say all this because, of course, at the same time, the welfare bill has been absolutely ballooning. We have huge numbers of people on benefits, so that's not working, is it? That's not working. All of this money being spent on the welfare state.
What we need to do is actually tax wealth and distribute wealth.
Okay.
That's what we need to do. And there's no promises from Burnham to do that. He's doing this kind of sweet talk because the Green Party is actually undermining him in cities. And we're the only party that actually has a policy around taxing the rich, rent controls, and fighting the exploding amount of wealth in this country so that people can actually live lives that are not in the poverty line. 4 million children in this country
I would say that we already have quite a few wealth taxes in this country, but Ashok Kumar, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you for your passionate response there, Green Party activist. Let's come back to the studio. Sir Michael Ellis and Amina Ali with me.
Well, I mean,
Sir Michael, there was a lot there to get through. I couldn't really come back on every point you made. He wants, obviously, us to go further left. Andy Burnham is already talking about, potentially asking for a little bit more when it comes to taxes, talking about not ruling out a wealth tax, talking about more public ownership.
Exactly. With great respect to that, I just thought it rather proved my point. Andy Burnham looks like he wants to move to the far left, further left even than Keir Starmer, partly to pull the wind out of the sails of the Green Party, who are, of course, also extreme left. And so this obsession with talking about Israel and Gaza and so on to the exclusion of what's going on in this country to a large extent is a factor.
First point, Ashok Kumar.
Exactly. It was the first point. First point. And, of course, there is no genocide and there is no apartheid. I mean, these are provable facts. But the
reverse is yet to be proved.
Yes, but on the actual point of the economy, we have seen a flight of the wealthy from this country. We also have seen the highest rates of tax since World War II. Now, we need to recognise what Margaret Thatcher found, frankly, and I know that Andy Burnham is no friend of Margaret Thatcher's legacy, but if you just look at the fact that when she came into power in 1979, the highest rate of tax in this country was 83%. When she left,
extraordinary to think,
it's extraordinary. When she left power 11 and a half years later, the highest rate of tax was 40%. And do you know, the Treasury coffers were receiving more money when it was at 40% than they were when it was at 83%. Why is that? Because it applies to human nature. If you're working hard, no matter what job you're doing, and you know that 83% of your profits are going to be taxed, you don't work as hard as if you know that you're going to be able to keep 60% of it. That is the engine of the economy. That is the Laffer curve writ large. So there is a balance to this whereby, yes, of course, we want to pay for our public services, but we do that by actually encouraging people to pay tax by working hard and knowing that they can keep the benefits of their hard work. That then allows the state to build its defences up. We've seen the defence of the realm suffer. You know, the Labour Defence Minister resigned, brought down Keir Starmer because he didn't feel that he could justify his continued position as Defence Secretary. We hadn't invested enough in the military. We haven't if you want to invest more in the NHS, you have to pay for it. It doesn't come from a magic money tree. And if you tax people into oblivion, you won't have the benefits of those incomes that you saw that Margaret Thatcher brought in by actually balancing tax with the public interest in that more intelligent way.
You have to squeeze the middle classes even more, unfortunately, because those with the biggest wealth, well, they can make changes to their lives.
Exactly right.
Amina, I want to get your response. We're going to go back a little bit and see what Andy Burnham had to say outside Number 10 when he delivered his incoming Prime Minister's speech. This is Andy on rough sleeping.
Now, I will soon go through that door behind me and issue my first instruction to end rough sleeping in our country.
Well, there you go, Andy Burnham there, saying his first instruction is to end rough sleeping. Former Labour councillor in Tower Hamlets, Amina Ali. Burnham missed his rough sleeping targets in Manchester. Why should we trust him on this one for the entire country? What's he going to do?
Well, I don't know. He's not actually explained how he's going to do it.
No,
he said he's actually is going to do it. I think it's a really good policy to do. I mean, obviously, rough sleeping is inhumane. Many of us don't like seeing people sleeping rough on our streets, especially in winter. That might go hand in hand building more housing, which is what we need. You know, we need to build more housing to put the rough sleepers into. So I don't want to be here about.
Do you think the taxpayer is going to be overjoyed by paying for more houses to be built for these kind of issues? I mean, it's a huge amount of money that would cost to put every rough sleeper in their own home.
Well, in hostels, and decent hostels, maybe. And then maybe if we tackle some of the immigration
we managed during
issues...
the pandemic, didn't we?
Yeah, we did manage during the pandemic. Every rough sleeper was housed somewhere in hostels, so it can be done. And I think that's important that he's actually said that. I mean, I don't know about him missing his targets in Manchester. It's an epidemic. It's a problem all over the country. It's quite embarrassing for foreign visitors to come to this country and see so many rough sleepers, especially in the summer, in the winter. It's quite embarrassing.
Labour decriminalised it.
Yes, and the Vacancy Act of 1824, I think you're referring to there, where they said that was the case. But look, the reality is, I think it's a cross-party point. No one wants to see homelessness.
Of course not.
And, you know, I'm sure no politician since Disraeli has wanted to see that. But this is where I think we're going with Andy Burnham. There are signs that he's very good at the platitudes. He's very good at saying things like hope and change and the sort of Obama-esque style, nice words. He's going to be a better communicator than Keir Starmer, that's for sure. And I think he will resonate more with more people. He'll also have better political antennae, my guess would be, more political nous than Keir Starmer, although it would be hard not to have more than Keir on that. I mean, frankly, he was sort of someone completely devoid of political antennae, it seems to me. But Burnham will have those qualities, certainly. But I don't think he's going to... look, he comes across as somewhat, to me, more like a teacher who's trying to be cool with the kids at school, you know, and will sit on the chair backwards.
I know what you mean.
And you know, sort of wear a T-shirt and sort of try and be down with the cool kids and sort of that. Actually, I'm afraid most of the time when you try and do that, people do think that you are, you know, they don't hold you in high regard, let's put it that way. And I think it's going to take more than the projection of those platitudes and the other performative stuff about what he's wearing and what clothes he's doing and how he makes his tea and all of that nonsense. You know, he's going to have a cold dose of reality with some very difficult decisions that have to be made. That's assuming he wants to achieve his own agenda. His agenda on the left will not be the agenda that I would support or that Kemi Badenoch would support. But even if you want to achieve whatever agenda, you have to actually make some tough decisions and you have to be prepared to defend them and make enemies. And not everyone is going to end up liking you. issue. In fact, by the end of today, there'll be quite a few people in the Labour Party that won't like Keir Starmer anymore. They will not be drinking the Kool-Aid on Andy Burnham either.
Yes, this sort of down with the kids, I'm the average Joe, I'm the bloke down the pub sort of thing. I don't know how long that's going to last.
But it seems to work for Nigel Farage, isn't he? The guy that sort of pretends he's down with the people, drinking in the pub and pretending a man who probably has no idea what it's like to be working class and living on the breadline. So I think, you know, it's rich saying Andy Burnham actually is a working class lad who did very well for himself, went to university and has actually done quite well to get to number 10. He has an understanding of what it's like to live in those communities that actually do need change and policy change. And he is bringing hope because, look, the last election in 2024, people elected a Labour government on hope because they were very tired of what the Conservatives have done for all those for over a decade, and they wanted change, and they voted in large numbers, and Keir Starmer got his majority. So people do need hope. The proof will be in the pudding in the next few weeks, the next few months, of how Andy Burnham actually delivers that hope. And I think until then, let the British public have their day of hope, I say.
All right, there you go, a day of hope. Well, one other thing that Andy Burnham promised outside Downing Street, well, he said, we need to raise our game, talking about politicians.
I am acutely conscious that I am the 6th person in the last 10 years to walk up this street, the 7th Prime Minister since 2016. Making this a moment for reflection and new resolution. It requires my generation of politicians to raise our game.
Well, it's one thing to say you understand what people out there think and that, you know, people out there want honesty, people out there want change, people want us to raise our game. Sure, yeah, absolutely. Who could disagree with that?
That's it. And I think, look, we have party leaders are very instrumental in how things can develop for their own party and also, of course, in Parliament and for the future of this country. And, you know, when, of course, we make reference to the fact that things have happened in the past, we have to recognise that with a new leader, just as Kemi Badenoch is a new leader for the Conservative Party, we don't say, do we, when we're talking about the football analogies, we don't say, oh, well, you know, under a previous team manager, that our team lost, and therefore we're never going to support them again. If you have a new team leader and you say, well, let's start afresh and see whether the new team leader can let us win some matches. Same thing with Andy Burnham now, except that Andy Burnham has not got a political mandate, and he has got a situation where, yes, of course, it's constitutionally proper for him to be in this position. No one's denying that. We allow that, and it's happened with Conservative Prime Ministers as well, although they had a bit more of a political mandate because they went through the mill. Andy hasn't gone through the mill, and this is relevant. It's relevant because when you don't have that sort of political standing, it means that others who wish to challenge you can give you a hard time and say, well, you didn't get put here by the people, you didn't get put here by, frankly, by a vote of anything other than an acclamation, a coronation by your parliamentary party, and therefore I'm not going to listen to what you have to say. And that's why he's off to a difficult start on day one, because of that absence of his political man. And that's by his own making, by the way, because he's engineered it this way. It's quite obvious that he's engineered it in this way, the by-election in Makerfield and so on. So he can't be surprised if the House of Cards is on weak foundations.
All the other Labour MPs were too weak to be able to stand up to him and contest him. It's almost as if they couldn't be bothered. Sort of Wes seemed to give up. Angela Rayner didn't even bother, I don't think, you know, throwing her hat in the ring at any point. Ed Miliband too. I mean, I'm sure there were others who were suggestions. Al Khan's. Yes. He was, you know, people thought that he might have a go. No, they were all just happy for Andy Burnham to essentially swan in, and he hasn't been in government for a number of years. I mean, it seems, if you're not a mad supporter of Andy Burnham, it does seem rather unfair to the public that this man is now our Prime Minister without having had faced any type of scrutiny from the public at all.
Yeah, look, I did say I wish we did have some kind of leadership competition, leadership challenging, so we could look at what other people had to offer. We could actually see what Burnham was having to offer. We didn't have that. I mean, the Labour Party, those individuals that you mentioned, Wes and Andrew, they have their reasons for not putting their hat in the ring. I don't know what their reasons are. But the reality is, I think after that Makerfield by-election and how he won amazingly in that by-election against the Reform candidate, he had the popularity. He won in Reform's backyard, in a place where Reform did really well, to be honest with you, and could have done really well if it hadn't been him. So maybe they thought that he was their best choice. Look, how did we get here? You know, that's the reality. We go back a bit. We got here because we had a leader that we could not sell to the public, that people did not want to vote for, that and had made lots of mistakes and lots of U-turns. It's about policy, about survival, and this is about the survival of the Labour Party, if I'm really being honest with you. And yes, it would have been great to have had a leadership contest as well. However, if Andy's going to be the best person, it looked like he looks like he is, to have come in to actually save the Labour Party, then I'm afraid maybe that could have been how it was calculated. Because I'd rather have the Labour Party saved, because I think the Labour Party in government is good. The manifesto we had was in 2024 is good, and we haven't had a chance to really bring those manifesto pledges to surface properly.
Okay.
And hopefully we can now.
Except that it's now the Welfare Party.
Well, there you go. Let's speak to Tom Harwood, who is down at Downing Street for us. Tom, so there's a lot of suggestions about who might be in the cabinet, who might not be. Should we start with, who do you think is going to get the boot?
Yeah, this is a big, big question. It does seem that there were some people that were around the centre of the Starmer operation. People like Steve Reed. Now, he was the Secretary of State for Housing, Communities, Local Government, MHCLG, as it's known. It looks likely that he will be out of government today, having been so close to the Starmer operation, not being a particularly effusive backer of Andy Burnham until the very last days. He's one of the people that was out here on the street as Keir Starmer was leaving. Some of Keir Starmer's closest allies were out here on this street. Other names in the mix: Peter Kyle, probably going to be out of government as well. There are some other names that have been basically on the side of the Labour Party that was most digging in to the Starmer project, most resistant to any sort of change. Likely those people will be out. And there's also a question mark of what balance ideologically there will be in Andy Burnham's new cabinet. Now, he says that he wants to represent all traditions within the Labour Party, so I will expect that there will be some sort of tokenistic appointments of people who are perhaps seen as more on the right of the Labour Party. But it's clear that Andy Burnham wants to make clear that this is his government, that everyone should be rowing in his direction. And that makes me think that some of those most senior positions will go to people on the soft left of the Labour Party, people closer to Andy Burnham's worldview. One of those positions that I've been mulling over in the hour or so since Andy Burnham was stood here on this street and gave his very first specific pledge is how important that housing department will actually be. MHCLG, as it is known, was the department that spearheaded getting rough sleepers off the streets during COVID. That's when a man called Robert Jenrick was the Secretary of State in that department. And it succeeded. During that first lockdown, there was a mass national effort to get rough sleepers off the streets and into emergency accommodation. And for some months, there was no rough sleeping in the country. I wonder if Andy Burnham looks to that example, looks to what happened under Robert Jenrick's tenure as that Secretary of State, and thinks that actually he needs a close ally, someone at the core of government in that department, to deliver one early win for his policy agenda, that one pledge that he made so openly, so candidly and so forthrightly without notes here on this street. And to that end, I wonder if Lucy Powell, the current Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, much tipped to become the Deputy Prime Minister, she's the Manchester Central MP. It would be a short commute for her to go to number 10 North, which will be in her constituency. Could she also be given that brief of housing, communities and local government in order to deal with rough sleeping. It would be a powerful message. That's just something I've been mulling over in my mind. But then there are the so-called great offices of state, whether that's the Chancellor of the Exchequer, the Foreign Secretary or the Home Secretary. Those three roles traditionally seem to be the most powerful, the most significant, carrying the most weight in government other than the Prime Minister himself. Well, those three positions will likely be some of the first announcements. And the hot tips from all of the bookies, from all of the pundits, well, it's looking like Ed Miliband could end up being Foreign Secretary. One interesting tidbit is that Ed Miliband, when leaving his department today, the Energy Department, the Energy and Net Zero Department, he gave a farewell speech to his staff, which doesn't sound like the sort of speech you would be giving if you thought you'd be returning to that department. Miliband, of course, has been incredibly close to Andy Burnham over the course of the last 6 months, helping advise him and encourage him, really, to make this seismic move towards number 10, to walk that tightrope, really, to unseat a sitting Prime Minister who just 2 years ago won an enormous general election victory. So could Ed Miliband be rewarded with one of those great offices of state? Quite possibly. Chancellor as well, one of those big totemic roles that will be such a difficult appointment for Andy Burnham. He both wants to do a lot more. He wants the government to be more interventionist in the lives of people in this country. And that means it will need to find ways to spend more money. But how will he do that if he appoints someone on the left of the Labour Party to that role? That might spook the bond markets, make borrowing more expensive, and ironically, by appointing a left-winger, he would have less money to spend because that borrowing rate would go up and therefore more money would need to be spent on our debt interest. Our debt interest payments are already so high. They are larger than the education, than the school's budget, I'm right in saying. I think they're the third highest proportion of government spending, third or fourth highest proportion of government spending alone is just debt interest as things stand. It's an enormous quantity of money. And then we come to Home Secretary, and Home Secretary is a very thorny issue. If indeed Shabana Mahmood, who is tipped to be Chancellor, is moved from the Home Office, there'll be a big question mark. Is it someone from the left of the party or the right of the party who's put in that place? And could they water down the proposed reforms that Shabana Mahmood was proposing to the immigration system? If that happens, might we see actually a big flank open up for attacks from the Reform Party, who have been surprisingly supportive of many of the reforms that Shabana Mahmood as an individual has put forward? But when, Emily, you and I have interviewed people from the Reform Party, while they support what Shabana Mahmood, well, they say she's trying to do, they do not trust that the Labour Party will allow her to do it. And could it be that Shabana Mahmood, given that effective promotion perhaps to the Chancellorship, actually moves the policy on immigration and asylum and that whole Home Office bucket of policies significantly to the left? That is a risk, but of course it's also about party management for Andy Burnham. By moving Shabana Mahmood, he might win some plaudits from the left of the Labour Party because he wants to water down that immigration and asylum policy, but also he might win plaudits from the bond markets because he moves someone seen to be on the right of the Labour Party into number 11 Downing Street, which is the door just over there. So could he be playing this tricky party management game as well as a policy management game? It's a game of noughts and crosses, or perhaps snakes and ladders, because ultimately there will be people who go up, there will be people who come down, but we will be seeing some people walk down this street later this afternoon to give the first indication of those early appointments.
Fascinating to see who he does end up choosing. Will anyone remain in their current position? That'll be very interesting to find out. Tom, there's a lot of things that might cost a lot of money that Andy Burnham has suggested. He hasn't spoken about the benefits bill, getting more people off welfare, trying to cut that. We know Keir Starmer had a tough time trying to do that himself. We haven't heard whether he's going to be getting tough on immigration. If Shabana Mahmood leaves her position, does that mean it's going to go to the left? Does that mean we're going to have softer borders. Council homes, a huge programme of building the most council houses ever. That's going to cost a huge amount. Ending rough sleeping in the short time he has left as Prime Minister in this Parliament. How is he going to do that without forking out potentially millions, hundreds of billions of pounds on new accommodation? Devolution itself, very, very expensive indeed. Public ownership too of utilities, some utilities. We don't exactly know where we are with that either. Tom, this could end up being quite an expensive tenure as Prime Minister.
Yeah, that's to put it mildly, Emily. Of course, there could be so many different pitfalls that this government gets into, and that's before, of course, we even think about the international situation, the cost of energy, and the rest of it. But there is a way through, potentially, for this Prime Minister. I'm going to try and give you the optimistic take on an Andy Burnham premiership now. We have heard some mood music around North Sea oil and gas. If that gets juiced, if Ed Miliband leaves the energy department and some of those restrictions that are currently placed on North Sea oil and gas are lifted, could that mean that we get a bit of a surer, steady start for our energy in this country? Those energy prices come down a little bit more as we increase production in the North Sea. That's one possibility. And there's another interesting possibility when it comes to this council house revolution that Andy Burnham spoke about in his speech. I find it absolutely fascinating that he linked council house building to the benefits bill. I can't remember exactly what he said, but it was something along the lines of using that council house building revolution to bring down the benefits bill. We know currently it's very, very expensive to put people in temporary accommodation. We know that budgets are being stretched all over the country by forking out lots for people to go into private rented accommodation at the cost of the taxpayer. Could Andy Burnham actually think that by creating more council housing, getting people out of that private rented but subsidised by the taxpayer sector, that actually that might save money in the medium run on the benefits bill? It's a possibility, but it would only work if he were to substantially liberalise the planning system. If it's as expensive to build houses in the coming 3 years as it has been for the previous 20 years, then that wouldn't represent much of a saving. Indeed, he would have to carry forward some pretty radical planning reform in order to get that housing built. And one way that he might be able to do it without an expense to the taxpayer at large is by following the model in Manchester that Andy Burnham presided over. He wasn't directly responsible for this model. That was down to local council leadership. But he didn't speak out against it, and indeed he has taken credit for much of it. Those big skyscrapers that have gone up in the centre of Manchester over the course of the last decade or so. Well, they had an interesting proposal, and that was the development itself didn't have social housing obligations attached to it. Instead, just they were taxed. So instead of these developments having to build subsidised homes within that development, Andy Burnham let them get on and build. And then there was just a simple rate of tax that could fund the government building the council housing. This would be a simpler way to get development done in this country. Instead of trying to force between a third, 20 to 30 to 40% of any development to be given away subsidised, instead, if new development could just get on and build, and you tax it on its profits at the end of the process, and government does the subsidised housing, you don't force developments to do subsidised housing as a part of those developments, perhaps you get more of both. That's a pretty wonkery different delve into those issues, but there are some ways in which Andy Burnham's proposals might well not be as expensive as they appear on face value. That is, if he does those big reforms to make it easier to build and to make sure that we're getting our oil and gas out of the North Sea. He will face significant institutional opposition on both of those issues. Of course, in 2023, under Rishi Sunak, the government tried to greenlight the Rosebank oil and gas field in the North Sea, and they were stopped by the courts. It's been stymied by court decisions ever since. Similarly, when Robert Jenrick was Housing Secretary in 2020 and 2021, he tried to pass sweeping planning reform that would have made it far easier to build, and that got defeated defeated after several by-elections, big backlash from environmental charities, backlash from the RSPB, backlash from the Labour Party as well. These things that would increase the rate of growth, these things that would increase tax revenue, like getting much more energy out of oil and gas from the North Sea, like making it far easier to build. There's a reason these things haven't been done, even though different governments have tried to do them. They are incredibly difficult, and they run up against enormous institutional resistance.
Tom, we're looking at Larry the cat, who's waiting to hear his cabinet position. He must be bored of this all by now. Tom, thank you very much. We'll come back to you very shortly. Thank you for analysis on that one. I think Tom's got a policy pitch there for on the old housing issue for the new Prime Minister. I'm just looking at our inbox now, gbnews.com/your say. I must say the level of cynicism, I'm not too surprised, personally. It does seem as though there's a revolving door, and the fact that the British people haven't been consulted on any of this is a bit much, in my view. Catherine says, I don't believe a single word that comes out of a politician's mouth anymore. That's from any of them. Any party must judge them by their actions, not by rhetoric and false promises. Abo says, think I need a bit more than the fairy tale comment about homelessness that has them mass media inclusive swooning. Yes, it is something that everyone wants. As you pointed out, Sir Michael Ellis, everyone wants an end to homelessness. It's about how you get there and what you're going to do in order to achieve that. Fed Up says, build a new national sense of unity. Andy, that boat sailed a long time ago and continues to sail from France on a frequent basis. I think that's a reference to our migrant channel crisis, that's for sure.
You just saw Larry the cat there,
We
Emily.
did just see Larry the cat.
And waiting for only a second before the security opened the door for him. He's now outlasted 6 Prime Ministers, you know. I mean, he's on his 7th Prime Minister, Larry, so that's pretty impressive itself. So
that is impressive and certainly worth noting, because inside that number 10 Downing Street, there's going to be a lot of phone calls going on, meetings. I wonder if a certain Donald Trump has made the phone call from the United States. Sometimes that's very soon indeed to occur, although I suppose it's very early in the morning over in the States at the moment. Should we cross back to Tom Harwood, because I believe he's got some news for us?
Yes, indeed, Emily. In the last few moments, Andy Burnham has been speaking to broadcasters, and we can bring you his first words from inside Downing Street as Prime Minister right now.
I will lead forward consistent with the manifesto, which also talked about change. And I now want to work on the platform that Keir Starmer has left to deliver that change, a massive change in our politics. That's what number 10 North is about, taking the power out of Westminster and Whitehall into every postcode in the land, and from there building a new economy. And that's what I will talk about today, putting the basics under stronger public control to make them affordable to people again, reindustrialising Britain, using public procurement to back British industry. These are big changes. They are the biggest changes in 40 years. We've had 40 years of trickle-down economics, which hasn't trickled down very much at all to many parts of Britain. You go up and down the country, you can see high streets in decline, communities that never recovered from the deindustrialisation of the 1980s, and this is what I'm about to change.
Well, there was Andy Burnham speaking from a homeless shelter a little bit earlier. Clearly, he's making this such a big priority for his government, this big pledge on homelessness. But there is still a question of what his government will look like and how he will deliver that pledge. I think he will be judged on it more than any other, because it was the first thing out of his lips and what he's really speaking about today. Everyone remembers Theresa May's burning injustices speech when she first took the podium outside number 10 Downing Street, and the rest of her premiership was judged on those burning injustices. I wonder if Andy Burnham's premiership in total will be judged on this homelessness pledge and just how importantly it's put up against all of the decisions that his new government has to make. But I'm with Christopher Hope here on Downing Street as things stand, because Christopher, in order for Andy Burnham to deliver any of this, he has to build a government. What are we going to expect over the next hour or so?
Well, right now, Tom, the sackings are taking place. all eyes on Twitter, because you'll see some ministers from the cabinet, maybe 8 of them might be going today. They may want to get ahead of it and put out their account of why they've gone and their reference to why their time in office. See how that plays out. Around 4 p.m. we'll start seeing them walking down Downing Street. These new ministers are appointed. Probably Shabana Mahmood in Treasury, maybe Wes Streeting over in Home Office. I'm thinking Rachel Reeves at Defence, a complete sideways appointment, but actually it's the kind of job that she might take, and she knows how to spend money properly, or she'll with a Treasury background, despite not being very well versed in armed forces.
Will the military establishment like a Rachel Reeves at the MOD? After all, I mean, they really did not seem to like her involvement with the Defence Investment Plan.
No, but she's got a £5 billion black hole in the plan she helped fund. Only about 10 or 11 billion of the 15 is there. She might know where it's found. All eyes, though, if I go back to what Andy Burnham was saying, he talked about a 10-year plan in Downing Street. Now, a 10-year plan is 2 terms of 5. Yeah. That suggests if he sets out a 10-year plan this autumn, is he going for an election this autumn? That's what a 10-year plan would suggest. He's not saying a 12-year plan, 2 years till the election and then 10 years. A 10-year plan would suggest maybe, I don't know, just a hint, we're not hearing it clarified in that clip we played earlier. He didn't answer directly, will you have a general election? But a 10-year plan suggests maybe it's 2 terms of 5, maybe an election call this autumn.
Well, it certainly does suggest 2 elections, and at least when Keir Starmer said 10 years, he was saying that immediately after one general election, so you're expecting, OK, maybe he wants to fight one more. Andy Burnham there, whenever the next election is, there will have to be 2 general elections. He's envisaging not just the next Parliament, but the one after that.
Labour's put everything on red. It's a complete gamble here. They can't change leader again. This is it. It's all on Andy Burnham. That's why you got that kind of incredible vibe here when he was unveiled, like it's a new government had happened. No, they've wasted really, or been in office for 2 years and not delivered what they want to do. Now, back in May, the Starmer government produced a new King's Speech with 40 different bills. Most of that will have to go if Andy Burnham wants to make his mark in the final 2 or 3 years of this government, unless he goes early, forget the King's Speech, we're going early. And also he said tomorrow he will announce plans for cost of living measures and how they're going to pay for it. That effectively is a mini budget, Tom, without Parliament sitting. And I find that quite interesting as a constitutional expert like yourself. You go, well, why is that happening? So if he sets out tax-raising measures tomorrow, or spending cuts or borrowing, where's the scrutiny?
The Speaker, Lindsay Hoyle, will not be happy, that's for sure. I was fascinated listening earlier to Keir Starmer's final speech from this street, where he didn't so much reflect on the last 2 years, but the last 6.5. And speaking of his 6.5 years as leader of the Labour Party, being that the frame of reference he wants people to think about, perhaps thinking that actually his greatest legacy was that general election, the 4 years leading up to it, that general election specifically, and then it's almost as if the last 2 years haven't mattered, that what's just happened on this street behind us has come, it's almost as if we've jumped back in time. The general election has only just happened, and Keir Starmer's speech seemed to lean into that idea.
Well, that's right. I think that Keir Starmer, he deserves credit. He made Labour election able to vote for again after those difficult years under Jeremy Corbyn. Anti-Semitism seemed to sort of infect the party. He dealt with that while Andy Burnham went to Manchester and forged his own career in Greater Manchester. So I think to that extent, the party, I think, will eventually be grateful for Keir Starmer. It all depends, though, how the next 3 years play out. He came into office, had no plan, got found out, appointed Peter Mandelson. I think they were too greedy for their landslide win. They could have won that without those commitments on tax and spend, which tie them into offending groups like pensioners and farmers. That'll be his problem, his legacy he'll want to move on from. But I think the party will see here's a guy who made this party electable again, but it's up to Andy Burnham to deliver on that. Will there be an election in the autumn? That's a speculation.
And if Andy Burnham, even if he wants an election, will the 411 Labour MPs elected the last election, will they wear it?
They won't be happy, Tom.
No, well, certainly, even if he does win that election, lots of them will lose their seats. Well, so much to discuss here, so much more to happen over the course of the next few hours. Sackings happening as we speak. Back to you, Emily.
Yes, absolutely. Do give us a big wave if you hear anything from inside number 10 on those sackings and future appointments to Andy Burnham's big new cabinet. Thank you very much indeed. Well, back to the studio here. We are going to be speaking to Harriet Cross, the opposition assistant whip, the Conservative Party, of course. Harriet, thank you very much indeed. So Andy Burnham, the new Prime Minister, the 7th in just over a decade. He stood out there without a lectern outside number 10, told us what he's all about. Do you think he'll go down well with the public?
We will have to wait and see. He certainly, up until now, thinks he will go down well with the public, but what they will really be worrying about and what the public should be worrying about is actually what he delivers. And to date, we do not know what that will be because he has faced very little scrutiny. He came in off the back of one by-election in Makerfield, not a general election. He's barely been visible in Parliament the last few weeks. He hasn't had any media scrutiny at all, apart from very few hand-picked interviews. And he won't face any questions in Parliament for another 6 weeks. So we really don't know what he's going to be like. And until then, it's hard to know what the public are going to get.
I must say, a lot of people pointing out in my inbox with relation to this big pledge to end homelessness, fantastic. But at the moment, we're housing tens of thousands of people who have essentially broken into Britain illegally in accommodation across the country, whether it's hotels, whether it's HMOs, whether it's military barracks and the like. But Andy Burnham has said nothing about that.
No, he hasn't. You're completely right. He has said very little about anything to do with immigration. He's said very little to do with defence or foreign affairs or energy policy. He said very little about anything. We don't know what he's going to do. He's got some very grand ambitions and big plans and says the right things at the right time, which he thinks people want to hear. But how he's going to deliver them is a completely different thing. He says he wants to build more houses. Well, where's he going to get the construction materials from? That's exactly the issue that the previous government had. Where's he going to build them? What's he going to do with the planning? What does that mean for the green belt? All these issues which the previous government faced, he is also going to face. He's got the same backbenchers who are going to give him the same headache as they gave to Keir Starmer, and he's got very little time to deliver any of these policies, any of these plans that he says he has. But until now, we have no way to know if he can, if he will, or how he will.
I mean, Kemi Badenoch has written a letter this morning to Andy Burnham, wishing him every success, but very much setting out her view on things, talking about how borrowing, inflation, unemployment are far too high, talking about the high tax burden, etc., etc. Also, of course, talking about the big welfare bill. Now, that's one thing we haven't really had an indication from Andy Burnham on. We know Keir Starmer tried for a little while to try and cut that welfare bill, or at least try and reduce it from ballooning more so. Do you suspect that Andy Burnham might be more willing to work across the divide on such things?
Again, it comes back to we don't know, because he hasn't said very much at all about what his welfare plans are. I mean, if he's
OK, well, let me ask you a different question then. How will the Conservatives respond to a man like Andy Burnham, who has been quite vague? He has been a sort of happy-go-lucky. He's made being Northern a large part, if not all, of his personality. He's spoken about devolution, which sounds very nice. He's spoken about how more power in all postcodes rather than just in Westminster. He's spoken about reindustrialisation, a lot of things that a lot of people will want to hear. How are you going to respond as the Conservatives?
Well, our job as the official opposition is to scrutinise what he says. If he says things which are good, which are funded and which are deliverable, then we will support them. If he suggests things which are not going to be deliverable, which are going to be hugely expensive, which are going to increase borrowing and are actually going to harm business, for example, as we've seen so much under the previous government, then we will not support him. It's as simple as that. Kemi has always been very clear. If something's a good idea, she's behind it. If it's a bad idea, she's not. It's a very basic principle to sort of run opposition on government on. But in terms of welfare spending, we saw the issue that the Keir Starmer got into, trying to make just £5 billion of savings, which is a tiny, tiny fraction of the full welfare bill. Andy Burnham is going to face exactly those same challenges. He's got the same backbenchers with the same lack of ambition to get a grip on welfare spending. So unless he has suddenly managed to get all of Labour on the same page and supportive, then these welfare changes are not going to come in. There is not going to be savings there. And that means that there is not going to be money to spend on, for example, defence or other priorities that the government should have. Taxes will also have to go up to cover the increasing welfare spend. And we're going to be back in exactly the same situation as we found ourselves in under Keir Starmer.
Now, you're the opposition assistant whip, Harriet Cross. That job entails trying to make sure everyone signs up to the same hymn sheet, making sure people vote with the party. Andy Burnham seems to think that there's no need for such things anymore. He seems to have suggested that everyone's going to be very friendly, everyone's going to follow, there's going to be a huge amount of collectivism and everyone's going to work nicely together. Is that perhaps a little naive?
I think it's more than a little naive. I think that might be a bit of a product of spending too long as a mayor where what he says goes. That's not how it works in Parliament. He's got 400 MPs who he has to keep on side, 400 MPs from across the country who all have a very different opinion on how things should be run, on what's best for their constituents, on if they want to see more spending, less spending, what their priorities are. He's not going to be able to do that without a whipping system. Whips also do more than just tell people how to vote as well. Very much the management day-to-day comes down to the whips. But no, if he thinks he can do this without his whips, one, he's undermining them, which I think is probably a very bad idea, and two, he's definitely underestimating how difficult his backbenchers can be when they want to be.
OK, Harriet Cross, appreciate your time. Harriet Cross, their opposition assistant whip in the Conservative Party. Let's come back to our panel here in the studio. So Michael Ellis and the former Labour councillor in Tower Hamlets, Amina Ali. Amina, listening to that, I think she's got a point, Harriet, from the Conservatives, that we don't know a lot about Andy Burnham. We don't know exactly how he's going to fund all of this. He did say that he would soon, but we don't know how soon. I don't suppose it's going to be tomorrow. It might well be in September when Parliament returns. Our inbox here at GB News is full of people expressing their deep scepticism that this man is not going to be this northern messiah coming to save us all, going to resurrect industries gone past, going to give homes to everyone. Can you understand that people just perhaps aren't switched on to what he's saying here?
I think, obviously, as you said, because we don't know exactly the detail in what he's planning to do, of course, people are going to be a bit more saying, you know, concerned about what he's saying because there's no detail there. And unfortunately, you're right, we might have to wait until September. But I do think, having said that, he's making clear what he intends to do, like devolution, you know, these kind of things. And they are popular, you know, they are popular with the public. Renationalisation of the industries, devolution. I mean, as a local council, when I was a local council, I would have loved to have more local powers.
Yeah, but I worry about this because you're giving, no offence to yourself, but you're potentially giving second-rate politicians more power.
I don't think I was a second-rate politician.
No, not you personally. No, not you personally, but some.
I think
giving power, and also could it lead to more sort of balkanisation in this country, for want of a better word? You have power being separated. I mean, if you look at devolution, has it made us more unified or has it made us more divided?
Factionalised. Well, look, I think it has. And look, you know, I think people are right to be sceptical. If you want to, there's an old saying, if you want to predict the future, look to the past. So let's look at what Andy Burnham actually did in Greater Manchester on rough sleeping, for example, as he's talked about it on day one in hour one. Rough sleeping actually doubled during his tenure as Mayor of Greater Manchester. That's not me saying that. Ian Dale has been saying that. So I think you can look to the fact that people say these platitudes, they say these performative things.
I know he missed his targets, but I didn't realise it had doubled.
Apparently so, and these are easily obtainable figures. But we also, there's another point to make, which is the factionalism that's writ large in the Labour Party still exists. So you can tell this by the speech that Andy Burnham just gave. So when Andy Burnham gave his first speech as Prime Minister, he didn't even mention Keir Starmer. Rishi Sunak actually mentioned Liz Truss, and others have perhaps through gritted teeth in some cases, have mentioned their predecessors. But apparently he didn't say a word. I didn't hear him say a word, and it's being reported, for example, by Harry Cole in The Sun, that he didn't say a word about his predecessor, his immediate predecessor. That, I think, tells us something about however many hugs and kisses and however much glad-handing there is on a day like today, the Labour Party is deeply factionalised. As Harriet Cross was saying, they are going to need a whip's office writ large, because you need a whip's office to, if you like, herd the sheep. There's lots of different, it's like herding cats at the best of times. Like Larry the cat, you know, but it's basically going to need that type of corralling, because there are so many factions that are wanting their own agenda. So I think you're right to be sceptical. People are right to be sceptical, and we've got to wait and see what happens. But one of the things that to watch as well, and Tom was saying from Downing Street earlier about the reshuffle that's about to take place, one of the most important positions, now I would say this, wouldn't I?
Oh, I wonder what it could be, former Attorney General.
Former Attorney General, yeah, I think, because, well, I do say that because you look at how consequential Richard Hermer, Lord Hermer, has been to the Keir Starmer premiership. Yes, they're clearly good friends, great mates, they've known each other since before politics and all the rest of it, but many would argue that Lord Hermer's direction on the law, the decisions that have either been taken or not been taken, which clearly Keir Starmer has agreed with, so I'm not suggesting that the Attorney General has directed, but they have moved in lockstep, and it has been consequential, I would say in a negative way, for the last Labour government under Keir Starmer.
Although I would like to replay at some point the interview that Christopher Hope had in Downing Street with Lord Hermer, because he seemed to say that Chagos had not that much to do with him, although he'd like to see it continued. It was very odd. We're going to have to leave it there because we have to speak to now Adam Cherry, editorial director at Guido Fawkes. Adam, you've got your ear to the ground. Can you give us any updates?
Oh, the same confused briefings that everyone else is getting have been for the last few days. I mean, at the end of last week, I thought it was extraordinary that in his first speech to Labour members, to the party when he became the party leader on Friday, Andy Burnham said he still hadn't made those cabinet choices contrary to popular belief. Whether you believe that, I mean, I'm not really sure. So in the next couple of hours, we'll finally understand the basic shape of this government, which is obviously, as you've been saying throughout the morning and throughout the last few weeks, incredibly important. Who is the Chancellor? Who is making all these tax and spend decisions? Who is the Foreign Secretary? We still don't know these things, and they tell you everything about this government, because this is the most extraordinary coronation or transition to power I think we've seen in living memory, and we've been through quite a few of these. Absolutely no scrutiny whatsoever. If you go on the Labour Party website, I said this on the channel just before the weekend, if you go on the Labour Party website, you'll see Andy Burnham's current plan for Britain, and it is 65 words long. It was encouraging for him to say on the steps of Downing Street today that he's going to outline a 10-year plan towards the end of the year. But where is this before he even came in? I think it's absolutely extraordinary.
Well, so you're saying he's been a bit lazy?
Or certainly indecisive, which I think maps onto his record so far. He often talks about his record in Greater Manchester for the last 10 years. Fine, but he seems to elide over the fact that he was also a cabinet minister. He was health secretary, he was culture secretary, he was chief secretary to the Treasury. Not junior briefs, and yet he never really mentions it because it didn't really achieve anything. So we're sailing into the abyss here. Hopefully, whoever he picks as Chancellor, we are hearing Shabana Mahmood, will be sensible.
Yeah, I mean, Adam, to be frank, are we going to be moving leftwards? Are we going to see more socialism, meaning more spending, more borrowing, more taxing on the wealthy, and then, of course, the middle classes?
Well, is it? We don't know, probably. He identifies as a socialist, self-identifies as a socialist, so we'll see if he's flexible on that position as he has been for many others. But we just don't know. That's why I'm saying, today, this afternoon, it's just absolutely mental, to be honest. The Chancellor decision is by far the most significant one he will make. Rachel Reeves was a disaster for Starmer, and I think was, more than half of the reason why he failed in the first place with that winter fuel allowance decision in the opening weeks of that government. I mean, speaking of which, when is the budget? If that's all the way in November, way beyond Labour Party conference, that has a paralysing effect as well, because businesses and business people say, well, I want to wait until I know what's actually happening with the economy before I move my money around. So we'll see. But like I said, it's quite a unique set of circumstances we're facing this afternoon.
Yes, and we know what it's like before a budget. The drip feeding of little bits of information that often contradict one another. This tax is going to go up. No, this tax is going to go up. No, we might have this threshold raised. Oh, no, we're not actually going to have that. Fuel duty, whatever else, it goes on and on. So having that clarity over when these things are going to take place, we need that.
Right, well, of course, and as usual, you'll get the drip feeding of briefings, and like you said, they'll be contradictory. I know Burnham promised that this wouldn't happen. This was one of his big announcements on Friday, or whenever it was last week, that he's going to put an end to this. And then a couple of days later, you have reams of briefings in the Times, the Telegraph, and elsewhere, as usual. And that'll be the same throughout this entire period as we lead up to this budget.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people are writing in who live in the Northwest saying, Manchester, there's huge numbers of people living outside in tents. He has not solved the homelessness crisis up in Manchester. As Sir Michael Ellis here was saying, actually doubled the number of people living on the streets since he became mayor of that city. What has he got now? What's this magic silver bullet that he's got that's going to solve this issue?
Well, he'll have to take money away from elsewhere or raise taxes massively. Neither choice is particularly palatable. I can't see him being particularly bold on cutting spending. Look what happened to Keir Starmer. He faces all the same problems. He's got the same Labour backbenchers who did in for his predecessor. None of them want to cut spending. They all have very small majorities. They're all very skittish, and they've got the bloodlust now. They've done it once before, and they've realised that they can actually control the top figures in this party if they boot off. So Starmer, or rather Burnham, might say that he's going to loosen up the whipping system and we're going to hold hands and sing Kumbaya, but I think once the rubber hits the road, we'll find it very, very difficult to do that. And who knows? Maybe in a year or two, perhaps sooner, we'll be doing this routine again, and all of Burnham's staffers will come out on the street, we'll clap him off, and then in comes someone else, Ed Miliband. Who knows? I
mean, there is the chance that he'll call a snap election. This may be the most popular he'll ever be. We know how it goes with prime ministers, and to be honest, the level of scepticism coming through to me today is just off the scale. And I can understand why. You'd be mad not to be sceptical at this stage when we've had Prime Minister after Prime Minister after Prime Minister. I can't believe this is the fourth under His Majesty the King's reign. It's quite extraordinary. Adam Cherry, thank you very much indeed for joining us this afternoon. Good luck working through all the different cabinet reshuffles, all the appointments, resignations and all of that. We will be hearing very soon who's getting the sack, who's going to be appointed to those top jobs. The smaller jobs might roll into tomorrow morning, into the afternoon, but Andy Burnham may just get everything done today. Who knows? But you're going to want to stick here on GB News to find out who is in those top jobs. Who's going to be Home Secretary? Who's going to be managing the borders and crime? Who's going to be our Justice Secretary? Who's going to be our Chancellor of the Exchequer? You want to stay on GB News to find out. But let's speak to the Liberal Democrat Cabinet Office spokesperson, Lisa Smart. Lisa, you've been watching what's been going on this morning. Andy Burnham, our new Prime Minister, no leadership contest, no general election, of course. How do the Liberal Democrats react?
I want the Prime Minister to do well because I want our country to do well. We've seen what happens when we've had pretty disastrous people taking the role. We've had 7 Prime Ministers in the last decade, and we've got some problems to fix as a country. And so I want him to do a good job. I want the government of the day to do a good job. I'm encouraged by some of what he said, but there were some really big gaps in what he said outside Number 10 today. There was no mention of social care, and anybody sensible knows that if you want to fix the NHS, you have to fix social care. There wasn't a lot of talk about defence and working with our European partners to grow our economy and strengthen our defence. And there was no mention of our natural environment, which is undergoing huge threat. So I'm hopeful, but I was also a bit disappointed today.
You're right, there was no mention of those 3 areas. I wonder whether you'll change, as a party, you'll change your approach in terms of providing opposition. Andy Burnham is a very different man to Sir Keir Starmer in many ways. Does that mean you'll adopt a slightly different behaviour in the Commons?
We like to think of ourselves as a constructive, responsible opposition. We don't want to say no just because it's a different party proposing something. If they propose something and we think it's a good idea, we'll support them to make it even better. If they propose something that's rubbish, we'll tell them we think it's rubbish. I think that's the duty of a responsible opposition. And look, we've supported some of the things that the Labour government did, things like support for Ukraine, which the Conservative government did before them. We strongly support Ukraine and will continue to do so. We don't oppose things when we think they got things wrong. So things like the family farm tax, things like the increase in employer national insurance charges. We could see the impact that was going to have on businesses, on employment, and so we opposed them at the time. We opposed the scrapping of the winter fuel, and the government eventually came round to our way of thinking, and we persuaded them along with the groundswell of opinion from the public that they got it wrong, they changed. But we will agree with people when they say things that we think are right, and we'll oppose them strongly and vehemently when they think they've got it wrong.
Well, one of the things Andy Burnham has made clear is that he wants a lot more house building, council homes, affordable housing, more houses in general across the country. Now, the Liberal Democrats, at least on a local level, have been known for pushing back on some house building, accused of being NIMBYs in some areas, not wanting to spoil perhaps the natural habitat, or not wanting huge amounts of new buildings in quite quintessential areas of the country. So are you for this? Are you going to be pushing back in some local areas if Andy Burnham says, you know, you need 2,000 new homes in this countryside area?
Burnham's been my mayor for the last 9 years or so, and so I've worked with him on building homes in my area and across Stockport. We've got the Mayoral Development Corporation in Stockport, which looks at the town centre in Stockport, and so as the mayor of Greater Manchester, he was the mayor behind the Mayoral Development Corporation, which really gave us the legal mechanisms to put into play what the local council, which is Lib Dem run, had been wanting to do. So it's regenerate the town centre, and the way it's done that is bringing together public and private organisations, looking at it in a more holistic way, a strategic way, and being able to deliver the homes that we need. What that has meant is that we've been able to deliver thousands of homes in Stockport town centre. I don't want to see just executive chocolate box homes going all across areas of our green belt, because I think the green belt matters, yes, for nature and our natural environment, but also for people's sense of well-being. You know, people choose to live near green spaces because of the impact they have on how we feel about things. So we do need more homes. There are ways of building more homes. That doesn't and shouldn't mean just concreting willy-nilly over the green belt.
OK, well, Lisa Smart, thank you very much indeed for your time today. Liberal Democrat Cabinet Office spokesperson there, just responding to what Andy Burnham has and hasn't said, really. Sir Michael, this is a running theme today. The lack of scrutiny of this man, the lack of questions being able to be asked of this man, the lack of detail when it comes to policy. I mean, we've heard some nice buzzwords, haven't we, that sort of indicate a shift to the left.
Yes, I think so.
Man. Can we expect to be taxed more?
I think we can, sadly. And by the way, if you look at the Liberal Democrats' voting record in the House of Lords, they vote 80% of the time with Labour. So, you know, effectively, that's where you can really test that sort of analysis out.
A very friendly opposition.
Very friendly. Look, I think when it comes to what's going forward, we're going to see a much slicker media operation. We're going to see something that's much more effective than Keir Starmer was on, frankly, manipulating the media, because what he will try and do is push out these sorts of soft messages like how he wears his clothes or how he makes his tea, or if you look how studied it is, though, look at the studied nonchalance, you know, the way he put that video out in front of a kitchen wearing a T-shirt and then put a suit on to go and see the King. There's a sort of a studied messaging about things like homelessness and about the suits and all the rest of it, which is sending a message which, you know, frankly, is part of modern politics, but it can hide what actually is being achieved. And if you actually say, well, I'm going to look at what he's achieved in Manchester, that is a better indicator of what he's likely to achieve going forward. And I think the studied messaging hides the factionalism, it hides the move to the left, which you can see by, the wish to move the dial even further to the extremes on anti-Israel and all the rest of it. This is becoming one of those totemic issues which indicates, how a government is going to run a country. If they're talking about Israel, if they're talking about platitudes, as opposed to talking about what matters to the vast majority of GBNews viewers, and frankly, not just GBNews viewers, the viewers of all of this country, they are wanting to know about the pound in their pocket, they're wanting to know about the cost of living, they're wanting to know how much they're going to have to pay the tax man, and how much they can keep for themselves to spend on their families the way they see fit, how much the state is going to control their lives, as opposed to them having the ability to control what they think is right.
Yes, I mean, he thinks we want to know about how he makes his cup of tea and, about what he thinks about the football.
That's right.
His podcast with Gary Lineker, it's all a bit twee. It's all a bit sort of. Yeah. We're not dum-dums, The nation is not dum-dums. Yeah. I mean, some of us are, but not all of us. And some of us do just want to go.
Well, it makes for a good soundbite.
How are these policies going to affect me? It's all fine and good having this talk of hope. Now, we do understand that Donald Trump is going to be calling Andy Burnham, as is custom, very shortly. Now, Andy Burnham has, like many Labour politicians, said some things about Donald Trump. In 2021, apparently Burnham said any UK politician who gave Trump the time of day should be ashamed. In 2017, he demanded the deeply troubling leader of the free world be banned from Manchester because of extreme views emanating from the Oval Office. He also called for a state visit to be cancelled. I mean, this is quite similar for the likes of David Lammy, for probably Ed Miliband, probably for Angela Rayner too.
And
silly comments.
Donald doesn't forget, as we know.
Could it be a bit awkward, to say the least? A bit childish,
Donald
those
Trump
comments.
does not forget things. That's a reality. And I'm sure it will be a very awkward phone call. However, I agree with those comments. Donald Trump stands up and slags off Tower Hamlets. He's never set foot in Tower Hamlets, and I think the people of Tower Hamlets don't want him in Tower Hamlets. So, I kind of agree with why politicians made those statements. But however, the interesting thing is, going forward as Prime Minister, you have to have a very different relationship, obviously, with the leader of the free world.
I just don't know why they come out with these things.
That's a fair point Amina makes. But look, the truth of the matter is that leadership brings consequences. And it's very easy if you're a person in the pub talking, or if there's no consequence to what you're saying. You can say what you like, and he could say what he liked about Manchester because it wasn't relevant. Now, of course, he's got to, live with the consequences of his words. And this is going to come quite soon to Burnham when it comes to Trump's relationship, because Trump is quite kinetic in Iran at the moment. The situation is quite serious there. There's a lot of military action, and I suspect that one of the things Donald Trump will talk about, whether we'll be briefed on it, I doubt, but one of the things that might feature in this conversation is, are you going to allow US military forces to use your bases to strike at our enemies, our mutual enemies?
Launch straight into that?
Well, he may do. He may leave it to his people to discuss it later. He may give Andy a chance to get his foot in the door, if you like.
Can you hold that thought for one moment? Because we are being called to Tom Harwood, who is at Downing Street. Tom, you got some news for us?
Yes, indeed, Emily. We've been looking at we've been reading between the lines of Andy Burnham's first speech here from Downing Street. And Christopher Hope, our political editor, believes that this is perhaps intimating the likelihood of a general election?
Well, our job is to read between the lines, because we haven't had a chance to ask the PM many questions, if at all. He just said, didn't he, in that speech, just outside Downing Street moments ago, he said, later this year I will bring forward a new plan for Britain, a 10-year plan, laying out a path from where we are now to where we all want Britain to be, wherever we're coming from, whatever party we support. Now, a 10-year plan, Tom, that's 5 times 2. 5 is also a 5-year term of Parliament. It suggests to me he may be looking at doing an election later this year and do 2 terms of 10. That's what Sir Keir Starmer always said he's going to do. I just wonder whether that was a big hint about going to the country later this year. He's got a problem, hasn't he? Back in May, barely 6-7 weeks ago, the King unveiled 40 new bills in this King's speech. Most of those the PM won't want to do, because he'll want to get his own ideas out there now. He's got 2.5-3 years till he has to have an election. Why not go early? Or if he doesn't, he's got to prorogue Parliament again, have a new state opening, more time taken up.
Let's follow this logic for a second. How would he do this? Labour is behind in the polls currently. It's unlikely they're going to be able to build a substantial lead to the same scale that they had in 2024. There will be, even if Andy Burnham ekes out a lead, a significant number of Labour MPs who would lose their seats. He will face massive institutional resistance if he wants to call an election.
Especially because a lot of them, dozens, maybe scores, will have supported him in a leadership campaign, only for the guy who they support to go to the country. Now, Melanie who is on the National Executive Committee, told me on your programme on Friday, we don't want an election now. And in fact, Jonathan Reynolds, the Chief Whip, said the same kind of thing. And of course, you don't want an election when you're behind in the polls, although they're creeping up with Reform UK. But I would say, if you want to be a radical government, you've got to move forward from where that manifesto was in 2024.
And of course, the last 2 years, this government has been so bound by this manifesto. Whilst not a legally binding document, it is binding by convention. You can't pass things through the House of Lords, and you can't guarantee to pass something through the House of Lords unless it's in the manifesto. Ultimately, there would be a way in which Andy Burnham could prove to the country and sort of try and eke out that lead in the national opinion polls. He mentioned one policy pledge in his speech, and that was to end rough sleeping. He didn't give a timescale, but a lot of people might not know that rough sleeping was actually temporarily ended in this country in 2020 during the first lockdown. There was a policy, I think it was called the all-in policy, spearheaded by Robert Jenrick. Every single rough sleeper in this country was found a place to get inside, to sleep indoors. If something on that scale is pushed forward by Andy Burnham, do you think he could call a press conference, maybe call us all back here to Downing Street in 6 months or so and say, look, I've achieved my goal, I've spent an inordinate amount of money doing it, but there are no rough sleepers, and there have been no rough sleepers for the last 3 weeks. I'm going to go to the country, let me do more.
Yes, he must deliver quickly. That's the problem he's got. Speedily delivery will ensure he wins that majority again, but can he do it? I remember back in mid-90s when Tony Blair came in, there's a huge problem with rough sleeping. Cardboard cities underneath Waterloo Bridge, a real issue for the Tory government. Labour did deal with that and end it to a degree. I just wonder whether he's sort of channeling that, because when you see a homeless person, that looks immediately like a societal failure. Why is the person on the streets? Often they can be veterans, by the way. That's a further issue. Why are they there? It looks like a clear failing by the state.
Although in London there does look like there is a lot of scamming from fake homelessness people, sometimes who are sort of put in, they have similar signs. I've seen so many people challenge these individuals. So some, yes, legitimate, some a little bit more tricky, many not citizens of this country, some illegal migrants. I mean, it's a completely complex issue.
Yes, I mean, when he did it in Manchester, critics said it actually resulted in more people going there who are homeless from other towns and cities to get a free bed for the night.
It's the problem California has in the United States.
Of course, but if you do it nationally, as you were saying earlier off camera, that can be a way of dealing with the problem once and for all, but it will cost money. I mean, the COVID pandemic cost us £400 billion, the energy shock £100 billion. All that money was put on the overdraft for the country, and that's limited room for manoeuvre. But we're waiting here, Tom, because behind the scenes things are happening we can't talk about yet. We've had a conversation with the Prime Minister already. We'll reveal what was said there later this afternoon, and also he's on the phone probably about now, standing down some of his colleagues from the cabinet. I think as many as 8 cabinet members might lose their jobs today, and we'll see the winners who are getting new jobs walking up the street later this afternoon.
It's a funny mix of phone calls that he'll be doing in the building behind us, both letting down cabinet ministers, saying, sorry, you're not going to be part of my government, or sorry, His Majesty's government, appointing other people, but in the midst of it all, taking phone calls from the likes of Donald Trump and Emmanuel Macron.
Well, in fact, it's the first call he's made, we are told, is to President Volodymyr Zelensky, who was with Keir Starmer last Friday. Keir Starmer gave him, of course, the Medal of Freedom for Ukraine. That phone call will go out, and he will doubly stress the UK's commitment towards supporting Ukraine. There may be a phone call coming in from Donald Trump. I'm not sure which way that phone call goes, and maybe same with Emmanuel Macron. Those calls should happen very quickly. We will be watching how soon Donald Trump phones him, because if he waits a while, that could be seen as a smug. It could be a snub.
Yes, well, we'll keep an eye on that one. Christopher Hope, thanks you very much indeed. Phone calls of all kinds from Downing Street.
Tom, and of course Christopher Hope, who will be in Downing Street for the rest of the day, I presume, and you, Tom, as well, finding out eventually who has been sacked. Up to 8 people may be sacked from the cabinet, from their ministerial positions, and who will replace them. As it stands, we're thinking Shabana Mahmood may well move from the Home Office to the Treasury as Chancellor of the Exchequer. What does that mean for immigration reforms? Lots of people on the left thinking she's been very tough on immigration. She has indeed tried to clamp down a little, at least, and on illegal immigration and asylum, on deportations and that sort of thing. Will Andy Burnham sort of forget all that and fling the borders open to the world once more? What does this mean for the Treasury? Will we see things go leftward? Will we see more taxes, more spending, more borrowing, nationalisation, whatever else that goes with leftward thinking? What will happen? Who will be sacked and who will be given the top jobs? Will Ed Miliband, who seems to have left the Energy Department, will he get a top job? Could he be our Foreign Secretary? What's going to happen to David Lammy too? But Andy Burnham saying today that this is going to be a circuit breaker for Britain. Reminds me of that awful period of COVID restrictions. Just one more circuit breaker is needed before our country can go back to normal. Is that what Andy Burnham's trying to conjure up in our minds? I'm not sure that's the most positive issue myself, but yes, he says he wants to end rough sleeping in our country. A lot of you getting in touch who know Manchester quite well, saying there's an awful lot of homelessness and rough sleeping and begging up there in that city. So will he be able to improve matters across the country? It's a massive pledge for someone who potentially doesn't have that long left in the job till a general election. Will he call a snap general election? Some of you saying, including Samantha, don't want there to be a general election just now because of the Burnham bounce. They could get voted in. He needs 6 months or more to fail first. Yes, I accept that logic there, Samantha. Certainly, perhaps it would be his wisest move to sort of, get a bit of that Burnham bounce, go to the electorate and secure his future as Prime Minister for a little longer, at least for another 5 years, that would be. Sir Michael Ellis and former Labour councillor for Tower Hamlets, Amina Ali, thank you very much in the studio. Any last thoughts? We've only got about 30 seconds.
I would just say, I don't think it's going to be a circuit breaker. I think it's going to be more of a circus than a circuit.
Very good, Amina.
I believe that Andy is the hope that the Labour Party need, and I think he's going to be a great Prime Minister.
Well, yes, a circuit breaker, more council homes, no mention, really, of the benefits bill, apart from, actually, he did say that building more council homes would bring down the benefits bill or something to that effect. I'm not quite sure how that would work in practice, saying my generation of politicians need to raise our game, rise to a new challenge. A lot of people will agree with that. People are fed up with politics. I hear you. Talking about 1980s Britain being a disaster. Do people really want to hear about the 1920s? We're in the 2020s. We're more than halfway through the 2020s, and he's still talking about the 1980s and perhaps even harking back to the 70s as some sort of time of success for this great nation. But yes, ending rough sleeping, more values, right standards at the hand of government, care of the people at the heart of everything we do. He says this is the moment we bring back hope, change and hope. Where have we heard that before? A huge number of you getting in touch today as we wait to find out who is going to be in that cabinet. Who is going to be surrounding Andy Burnham? Are we going to see a more socialist government, or is he going to be, you know, sensible, middle of the road, sort of centre-left government, continuing on the Keir Starmer vein of thinking, or lurch to the left? The Green Party certainly want him to. But yes, Scott says Andy Burnham led a coup to get the Prime Minister job. I hope he knows, has the same done to him. 12,500 people voted for him in Makerfield as MP, but the rest of the country didn't. And that is what I can't really get past at this moment, just how we ended up in this position where a man can be essentially parachuted back into the House of Commons through a manufactured by-election, and then no leadership contest, no general election, but he's Prime Minister. We await to see what he has planned for our country in a little more detail. But thank you, Michael Ellis. Thank you, Amina Ali. So as an old Prime Minister goes out, a new one comes in. Andy Burnham, crowned Britain's latest Prime Minister. This is a circuit breaker for the nation. Let's have a look at what's been a very busy day. Goodbye.
I'm about to visit His Majesty the King. My work is done.
He's blown it, hasn't he? Yes, really. For me, he never got beyond the fact he's a judge's lawyer, not a jury lawyer. He's not a people person like Tony Blair was. Andy Burnham definitely is.
He's got a huge role to play internationally.
Here's the applause. Here he comes. There we are. He's kept his suit and tie on, I'm pleased to say.
He's our 7th Prime Minister in the past 10 years.
He cannot make those same mistakes.
Will it work out? They've got 3 years at most.
Exactly. And he says he will govern as Labour, authentic Labour. I think that means ever higher taxes.
I have just come from Buckingham Palace, where I have accepted His Majesty the King's invitation to form a government.
What would you do with £60,000 cash? What would you do with a real gold bar? Well, both have to be won in our Golden Summer celebration. First, there's £60,000 in tax-free cash to bolster your bank account this year. Plus, we'll also give you a fine gold bar worth over £5,000. For a chance to win, text GOLD to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB22 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 21st of August. This is a network giveaway. Entries will be pulled. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays, I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions. But every Friday night at 9 p.m, you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Some people enjoy lazy Sunday mornings, but not me.
What's the truth of the matter? So that's a very live question. Would you support him if he waters down these plans?
Before the spin sets in, I'll be getting to the truth.
This is personal.
No soft questions, no easy answers.
It's one thing if the state has rules in this country. It's another thing whether the police and others actually police them.
Setting the agenda and holding those in power to account.
You can't really blame her if the system is set up this way. You will not want to miss it, trust me.
The Camilla Tominey Show, Sundays from 9:30, only on GB News.
Welcome to Free Speech Nation with me, Josh Howard. This is the show where each week we see what's happening in the world of culture, current affairs and politics.
First we'll say, welcome to the UK. Oh, thank you.
And we're not afraid to use our free speech so that you can use yours.
It's not controversial in the slightest to anyone who hasn't lost their mind.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights at 7 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
As soon as it hits 11 and the headlines come in,
the Late Edition brings you the breaking news from all the front pages.
Because the news is going to happen.
So get a head start today.
Patrick Christie's Tonight, Late Edition.
Alex Armstrong Tonight, Late Edition. From 11 o'clock every night.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Very, very good afternoon to you and a happy Monday. It's 3 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Dalby Show here on GB News, broadcasting for you until 6 p.m. A huge story awaits today in politics. Top story today, of course, is this.
Bring forward a new plan for Britain. Let us make this the moment when Britain starts to believe again. The moment we bring back